Hello to all of our listeners out there in podcast land, and welcome to episode 9 of the Canadian Patriot podcast, recorded on January 4th, 2016. Joining me this evening, we have Tyler, the co-founder and co-host of the International Liberty or Death podcast. Tyler's been shooting for 9 years, both as a casual and sport shooter and as a hunter. He identifies politically as a libertarian. Gavin, a business owner, gun enthusiast, hunter, atheist, and host of the Greater Toronto Area chapter of the Tactical Beard Owners Club. And I'm your host, Andrew. I'm a competitive shooter, gear reviewer at everydaytactical.com, gun club director, and a libertarian. We'd love to hear your feedback about the show. Please visit CanadianPatriotPodcast.com/feedback or email us at feedback@CanadianPatriotPodcast.com. I also have good news for all of our subscribers. We're available on both Stitcher and now on iTunes. So if you'd like to be one of the other 6 people that follow us on Stitcher, please visit Stitcher.com. There'll be a link in the show notes. Gavin, Tyler, welcome. Thank you, as always, for being on with me. How was everybody's?
Anytime.
How did everybody enjoy their vacation, their Christmases and New Year's and Yule and Kwanzaa and Hanukkah and all of their other politically correct things that they might celebrate or not at this time of year?
It was good. Got some shooting in, got some drinking in. So I covered the basics, I think.
It's important. I hope those were separate activities.
Yes, very separate.
Excellent. We wouldn't want to give anyone any ammunition to use against us.
No.
My holidays went well too. I ended up working both Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve, but that's what you got to do to make ends meet and keep things on budget. So can't complain about work. But I had a nice time. Nice to get together with the family. I live like 2 hours away from my closest family members, so it's always good to see everybody. No fights, so that's good.
Even better.
All right, and I see I'm not the only one. What is everyone drinking? We've got a new segment where we tell people what we're drinking, since everybody is, I see, drinking.
I've got a nice bottle of carnivore wine going on.
Nice.
Figured it was appropriate.
I'm bringing back an old favorite, a bottle of Darling Carling. Takes me back to my school days.
Nice. That's I've got a bottle of homebrew because I'm classy like that.
You need to start getting some growlers with your name on it or something you can hold.
Dude, I have growlers in the other room. This is the gun room. The brewery is on the other side.
That's because you got to keep those things separate.
You got to keep it. It's the same as the ammunition. It's got to be locked up and separate. No, our first batch of homebrew finished up at Christmas time, so we bottled it while my mom was visiting.
Nice.
And the bottles have now conditioned long enough that I'm comfortable drinking it, and it turned into beer, so I'm really excited about that.
Well, that's always good, yeah.
Well, yeah, I took a bunch of stuff, and I put it in a pot of almost boiling water, and I waited a month, and then I got alcohol. So,
yeah.
I mean,
it's amazing.
It's science, man. Science.
Mm-hmm.
We've also got some really good stats for everybody for 2015. We did 8 shows. Which was 1 show a week for 2 months, which was exciting as a new podcast. We achieved over 600 downloads in our first 2 months on, I guess it's not on the air, but on the internet.
Close enough.
So I want to thank both of you for being part of some of those podcasts, some of those episodes. We also have over 50 people subscribing to our YouTube channel, and we've had over 1,000 views across all the episodes. So again, very, very happy to see those numbers. I'd like to remind everybody to like us on Facebook. We only have 150 likes, and I'd like to break 200, because that would put me in runnings with a certain other podcast that Tyler might be familiar with. Because I see you guys are up to the 200 the other day.
Yeah, it really stagnated there for a while, like around 170. It just kind of hung there for months.
Well, I kind of hope I don't get the same issue. I'd like to break 200 this month, because that'd be 100 every month consecutive.
Yeah, we're a bit of a niche podcast, I guess, with limited appeal.
Well, I don't know if we'd go so far as to say this one is less limited in appeal. The Canadian audience is not nearly as big as the rest of the internet, and the stats reflect where people listen, and it's mostly Canada.
Yeah, interesting story actually regarding podcast fame or internet celebrity. Matt, my co-host, he was at a dinner date with his wife, and it was like one of those like hibachi grills where you might have like 3 or 4 other parties at a table. And he ended up talking to this guy who was next to him, and he turned out he was like an Air Force guy. He had been cycling back to and from Korea, and Matt told him about the podcast. And the guy was like, "Oh, I thought I recognized your voice from somewhere." He actually listened to the podcast, and I
Nice.
thought that was bullshit. So I went around him and I talked to his wife, and she actually confirmed that was true. That happened. So I thought that was pretty cool.
That is very cool.
Yeah.
It's got to be neat. And before we do the freedom update from Sean, I'm sure both of you are going to be aware a certain rock and roll individual passed away recently.
Yes, sad news.
Very sad news. But if you haven't read Lemmy's book, go read Lemmy's book. It will change your life. Lemmy wrote a book called White Line Fever. It's his autobiography. We're going to, actually, before we go into the news and Sean's interview, we're going to talk, I'm going to read one part out of the book. I'm going to read another one later in the show. Lemmy has a lot of great things to say. Some of them are incredibly applicable to the stuff that we talk about on the show. The first quote is, "Apparently people don't like the truth, but I like it. I like it because it upsets a lot of people. If you show them enough times that their arguments are bullshit, then maybe just once one of them will say, 'Oh, wait a minute, I was wrong.' I live for that happening. Rare, I assure you." Again, that's from Lemmy in his book, White Line Fever. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners like me are very sad to hear the passing of a rock and roll legend.
Well, at least it was quick. I mean, he found out on what, the 26th or something, and was dead 3 days later or something ridiculous. But I mean, that's appropriate if nothing else, right? Like,
No, it's the way that man lived. He was a larger-than-life individual, and he wanted to have that image of being a rock god, and you know what? When it's time to die, show up sweaty and covered in booze and blood and sex and slide in and go, "That's a hell of a ride."
well, I mean, his lifestyle and everything, I'm surprised he made it as long as he did.
Well, man, it's the Keith Richards plan. That's all that is.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Keith Richards is actually dead. He just took some drugs in the 70s that just haven't worn off yet, and his body is still just moving. But yeah, he's not actually alive. That or he's a robot. One or the other. Maybe both.
All right. So we'll cut to an interview with Sean talking about the Magna Carta Group. And then we'll cut back in. And we'll do the news. So, the news. Starting with things from the Department of Making Me Sad. It's the 1st of January. It's actually the 4th of January, so we're late. So all the new laws for the year come into effect. I have an article that we'll put in the show notes. As always, everything I say will be in the show notes. It generates traffic because keywords are important.
Well,
the first one's a CTV news article with a bunch of the different laws. We'll just go through them. You guys know the game. Interject when you think somebody's doing something stupid. We'll talk about it. Income tax cuts for the middle class. So apparently the income tax rate is going to change if you're making between $45,000 and $90,000 this year, and it's going to drop to a whopping 20.5% from 22. So as soon as the Ontario pension plan kicks in, the 1.5% savings is gone. So enjoy your income tax cuts. The estimate is this affects only somehow 300,000 Canadians, which I don't understand how there's only 300,000 Canadians in that tax bracket, because that seems like it should be
the bulk of the people.
No, I think that actually refers to that last note there where it says, at the same time, the rate on all income earned beyond 200,000 will rise 4%. I think that's only 319,000 people that fall into that bracket.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, okay. I read the article wrong. That's not news. I've been drinking.
That, or maybe it's all those people with private businesses as tax shelters that are exempt.
Well, that is why we own small businesses. I know because it's 2015 and a certain prime minister told me so.
Well,
remember that small businesses are just a tax shelter for the very wealthy.
Yeah, because I certainly don't pay any taxes as a small business owner.
Yeah, no, not at all.
One thing I'd like to throw in here is that people often think of the taxes they pay in terms of the income taxes that are levied on their income, but it's so much more than that. You obviously, whatever you take home and then subsequently spend on things, if you live in Ontario anyway, about 13% of that money, there's a 13% charge on every transaction that you do.
But,
And when you're buying a given product, you're paying you retailers income and property taxes and all the associated fees that they have to pay, and then their suppliers, all of their income and property taxes are of course built into that price. You're paying like 50, 60+% tax.
Yeah,
yeah.
well, it's totally stacked. Not tolerance, but a stacked.
Yeah.
I can't think of the word. Yeah, tax on top of the tax on top of the tax on top of the tax, because it's just everybody is getting passed on to the next guy until the consumer buys something.
Well, yeah, and HST was supposed to stop all of that, but it didn't. But I mean, the thing that really pisses me off of all of that is like I go buy a new car. Okay, I pay all the taxes and all of that. Sure, I go and turn around and sell it to somebody else. What's the first thing the government does when you try to change the ownership? Charge you the fucking tax on a car that you've already paid the fucking tax on.
Yeah.
Like, come on, that's absolutely ridiculous. Like, fine, new product, sure. I mean, roads have to get paved, healthcare needs to be paid for, and all of that. I can accept that, but the tax has already been paid on that fucking car. Why am I paying it again? Like, it's absolutely nuts.
You're paying for it so that somebody can get a $2.5 million grant to study the mating habits of gay squirrels. And you chuckle, but you know that's true.
Well,
yeah, no, I have nothing. I have absolutely nothing. Because you're right.
I mean, I know for a fact that the Canadian government spent money researching why, like, when you have, like, not an avalanche, but, like, the same thing, but with sand dunes, it makes this weird humming noise, apparently, which is kind of unique and interesting, right? And, sure, why not figure out why? But I think there's more important things going on in the world we should be spending on rather than why does sand hum when it falls down a sand dune, right? Like, so yeah, that's why I was chuckling, because we do spend stupid money. Interesting, yes, but maybe that should go to cancer research or heart disease research or, I don't know, feeding starving children or something before we spend it on why does sand hum.
That's what always gets me. There's always plenty of money to dump into these government boondoggles or to just hand out grants for, quite frankly, stupid purposes or to just dole out to other countries, but there never seems to be enough money for adequate healthcare, adequate police resources, adequate military spending, or to take care of people who really need it in this country, and it's so frustrating.
Yeah.
All right. How about the easing student debt burdens? Canada Loan Program will no longer cut support to working students for every dollar they own over $100 a week. No?
I mean, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing because if it makes it easier for people to go to school. We become a better educated country as a whole, which we've proven long-term helps. But if it comes at the expense of something else, that money that they would be paying back sooner is needed for, then, you know, I guess time will tell. But
yeah, I don't know. On the face of it, this one doesn't seem like a terrible idea because, you know, more people getting educated is not a bad thing. Does everybody need to go to university, though?
No.
Probably not. At the same time, should the government be running a loan racket? I mean, lending money to students? No, probably not.
Well,
I don't know. This one is not intrinsically bad. I just don't think the government ought to be involved in the first place.
I think they're going about it the wrong way. I think they're treating a symptom and not the disease itself. You know, obviously the problem with the education system is the expense. I mean, the student loan system is very generous. You know, there are lots of grants that you can get if your grades are adequate, and you know, it's well funded. There's lots of money floating around, but I think the problem is the outrageous cost of higher education and how that's ballooned over the decades. And, you know, this actually goes right back into what we just said 5 minutes ago, the ridiculous amount of money being thrown around.
Yeah.
You know, somebody's got to pay for it, and it ends up being the students.
Yeah,
and then they end up paying student loans for 10 years.
Yeah, instead of spending money on the mating habits of gay squirrels, they could spend that putting some kids to school, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or that tax decrease. Maybe they don't decrease it and put that 2% towards putting kids to school or something. I mean, that's
Yeah, there are definitely better ways the government could spend my money.
Yeah, a lot better ways.
Um, Another blow to the rich and powerful in Canada, I'm sure. The TFSA dollar limit has been decreased from $10,000 annually to 5,500. So I'm sure that the TFSA is only an investment vehicle for the incredibly wealthy business-owning Canadians. It doesn't impact the average Canadian.
This is actually this is a scam. See, by making it more difficult to save money, then like if it becomes if they take away the incentive to save money, then people just spend it, right? Because if you can't save it in that fashion, then it just inflates away at like 2% a year. So you might as well
Yeah,
spend it, and that's where they scoop that 13% off. You know that's just a way to recoup the money. It's a way to get their hands on the money.
it absolutely is. The next one I really like. I guess this is a bid to compete with Uber. Quebec is enforcing a new municipal bylaw that requires their cab drivers to wear a specific dress code of dark pants and shorts or a white. I'm sorry, dark pants or shorts and a white shirt. It's not pants and shorts or a shirt. It's pants or shorts and a shirt.
I'm okay with that. I mean, like, look at any other transit official. They've got to wear a uniform of sorts. I mean, they're doing a job. Why shouldn't they look at least somewhat tidy?
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, it doesn't affect me. I'm not a cabbie, but
yeah. I don't know. I mean, I don't take cabs. If I have to travel for work, I have to go to Toronto, which is an hour drive. I take a limo
yeah,
because it's the better price, and they
yeah,
already make their employees dress nicely because it's a limousine service.
yeah.
I mean,
I
I
mean,
realize that I'm like in the 1% and whatever because I'm a business owner with a TFSA, but I mean, the cost of a
well,
cab and the cost of the limo usually works out to be cheaper. So
well,
we
yeah,
take
because
the
they
thing
give you
that's
the flat
cheaper.
rate. Yeah, they give
Right.
you the flat
That
rate. Yeah.
Yeah. So for
No,
us, it's usually cheaper to go from the office to Pearson in a limo than it is in a cab. And
exactly.
I don't care what they look like as long as they can drive the car. But you know what? Their employer already says, "Hey, don't dress like a slob."
Yeah.
So Montreal saying this is like a municipal bylaw now for what should be privately run services. I don't know. I don't understand why.
Yeah.
Like
I
this
mean,
is strictly a like. Well, Uber's unprofessional. Look at our cab drivers. They wear black shorts.
yeah. I mean, when you put it that way, it is a bit ridiculous. But at the same time, yeah, it's something that the cab company should be enforcing on their own. And if it's so much of a problem, like that somebody else had to step in, then what the hell are those cab companies doing? Like,
Yeah, that's I have no one I can't understand why a municipality is regulating a private business. Like,
Well, it's because it's not really a private business, right? It has to like a cab company operates under license from a given
yeah,
municipality.
sure, yeah,
So
absolutely, but
they have until Uber and other companies, other similar ride sharing companies came along. They were operating under the protection of that license issuing scheme, and so
yeah,
that took away competitive pressures. But now that Uber's there and it's really mopping the floor with these people. Uh, People are clamoring for regulation to level the playing field, right? Make it more expensive for Uber to operate because the cab companies are buying these licenses. Like, what were they saying? How much one of those seals costs? And then that has to be, spread across their whole fleet of cabs. Um, but that's kind of the core of the debate here. You've got one company that's used to being insulated from competition versus another company that's coming on and kicking their ass.
yeah,
yeah. But I mean, they are providing a much superior service. I mean, and after that protest that those guys did, man, I've lost all sympathy for some of those cab drivers. Like
dude,
blocking an ambulance on the highway and all of that. Like that was way to piss off the people that use your service. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. You know what? Before I didn't care. I'd take whatever was available.
ah, I
But
was the
now
same.
if I have to pay somebody to drive me, I'm going to go out of my way to use Uber just
Well,
because of the way that the image
yeah.
of the cab drivers in Toronto was presented.
Oh yeah, like they have a problem with City Hall. They should have circled City Hall and gave everyone in City Hall a bad time, but not the general public that uses their service and whose support they want. That was the
Yeah,
worst way to get them behind them. Like the only reason I used a cab on New Year's Eve was because it was on the street, and New Year's Eve was probably the cheaper time to get a cab because of the way Uber does their pricing.
Yeah, because you're not
Mhm.
paying for peak service, sure.
But yeah, it was purely a financial decision and not a I want to support a cab company. It was convenient they're there, and it's probably going to be cheaper because they're not going to jack the rate.
Yeah, they're not.
But,
You know what
but
though?
yeah,
I'm going to go out of my way to use Uber if I have to pay somebody to
oh,
drive me around.
any other time for sure I would have, but not that night because I'd already had
Yeah.
quite a few drinks, and the cab was literally right there in the street in front of me, and I was like, yeah, all right.
Bottom
Fine.
line is,
Yeah.
these ride-sharing companies like Uber, they've got a superior business model. It's a better way of doing business. It's a better way of meeting customer demand.
And
And
safer.
obviously, the customers, like the market, has responded very favorably. And the existing cab model with the centralized dispatch, it's inefficient, it's slow, and with it operating under like a government, we'll just call it insulation from competition. This service has declined. People complain about the cabs being unclean, or there being like an odor, things like that. It's just the time has come for a new way of bringing this service to the market. And you roll things back 100 years. The carriage makers were boycotting the car. They wanted the car to be banned.
Yep.
People will always oppose competition, and they'll use government mechanisms to try and stifle that competition. So I think people need to be very conscious of that.
Yeah, and this is the thing that drives, like, the cab company should get ticked off, sure, but the cab driver, go work for Uber. Like,
Exactly.
if
Exactly.
they're making that much more money than you, no one's stopping you from going to work for them.
Yeah.
Yep.
The next one, Ontario winter tire tax break. Insurance companies will be required to offer some form of a discount to Ontario drivers to install winter tires on their car. I thought every insurance company in Ontario did this anyway, just as an incentive.
I don't think mine does, so I'm gonna double check on that one and make sure they do. And I'm all for that because it's about time that the insurance company did something for me with all the money I've given them over the years.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly hadn't heard of
Like,
an insurance company that doesn't do this.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, auto insurance is the most ridiculous thing. Like, you pay all this money in case something happens, and then when something does happen, you pay more money.
Yeah. Oh, it's totally. Yeah.
It's a scam.
It's a scam. We're all in agreement.
Oh yeah. Like, I mean,
This is one thing. Trump said it about healthcare, health insurance, and he got up on stage. I think it was during the first or second Republican debate, and he's like, when I go to negotiate health plans for my employees, I've got like one bidder because of laws that prevent companies from out other states, coming in and putting in their bid.
Right.
And the same thing is true for auto insurance with regard to the provincial boundaries. It's always better to have more competition, because then you have companies that offer these incentives to attract your business. And it is true that, at least to as far as I know, I'm with you, Andrew. I'm not really aware of any company that didn't do that already. But at any time companies aren't doing something like that, it's a sign of too little competition.
Yeah. So, the government doing that is awesome for that one company that Gavin uses that doesn't do it.
well, I mean, mine's all done through the office, so because I'm that rich asshole, so
Yeah.
I don't even bother looking at the bill. I'm just pay it. Yeah, get this out of my face.
Take it out of my
There's
TFSA.
no way.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
it's all in a tax shelter and everything, so who cares, right? Like, it's
Exactly.
company money, not my money.
Another Ontario driving law. Fines are going to start for pedestrian crossovers in January. So if you're at a designated school crossing or pedestrian crossover, commonly referred to as a crosswalk, thank you, Ontario driving laws, there's a fine of between $150 and $500 for some arbitrary reason that says that you must yield and wait until the pedestrian crosses the entire width of the road. So
Now,
I
there
hope
is
nobody
a-
wanted to make a right turn.
There is a little bit in that the pedestrian, if they enter the intersection without enough time for a car to stop, the pedestrian is actually at fault. Which I'm
What?
glad they added that, but I think the law as a whole is stupid.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that they put the addendum in that if
Yeah.
the pedestrian's being an idiot, then the pedestrian's an idiot.
Yeah,
Right.
but only if they enter the intersection late. If they're just taking their sweet ass time and just stop in the middle of the road to tie their shoe or something like that, even though they're well on the other side of the road that you're on but not fully across,
Yeah.
you've still got to wait. Like, that's going to be so annoying.
I want to know how they're going to assess the fine because it's such a huge, like it's a $400 variance between the bottom and the top end.
Maybe they measured the distance of the road and like how far across the person was.
They tack on an extra $50 for every additional person still on the road. Like, what are they going to do?
Yeah,
it's silly, Like I think it's stupid because the implication is that both the pedestrian and the driver are too stupid to make an intelligent decision as to when it's safe to proceed.
Well, yeah, and like my problem is that I mean, there's so many people that when that first came out that weren't necessarily interpreting it correctly, and as shitty as it is sometimes, police officers who enforce the laws are not experts on the law.
No, there's too many laws for them to know them all. They know the laws they deal with every day, so they're going to know the highway traffic.
And this is the thing, though. So when you come up to an intersection where there's a crosswalk in an intersection, if a guy doesn't understand it, he may give you a ticket for not allowing a person to cross the road completely. Which, I mean, if you're at a busy intersection, you're never going to get to turn if you wait for the person to be all the way across the road.
Exactly.
But are you going to argue with the cop and try to prove him wrong? No, you're going to have to, like, take the ticket, go to court, and fight it later. But that costs time and money that a lot of people don't have.
Yeah. This is a law written by somebody who doesn't drive to work in a downtown area where they have to deal with it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just these laws that just violate, every aspect of common sense. That they are written by people that just don't have to deal with it. That they're just so far removed and out of touch.
Yeah.
They don't realize the implications.
Well, exactly. Like if someone's crossing the street and I go by fast enough or close enough to them that I could have hurt them or something, then I should be charged with reckless driving or endangerment or something, right? There's already laws in place.
We already have laws, exactly. We already have laws to deal with that.
Yep.
How about the change to the Alberta distracted driving penalty? In Alberta, if you're caught using a phone while you're operating a car, there's a new max penalty, 3 demerit points and $290.
It's just, wasn't there already a dangerous driving charge on the books? Like, do you really need a redundant law just to dictate behavior? Like, if somebody is weaving across the road, they're weaving across lanes and stuff, like, can't you ding them with dangerous driving? Like, do you really need more laws upon laws?
Either that or amend a previous law to include cell phone use or eating a sandwich or drinking.
Yeah.
Or, like, I mean, if you're driving like an asshole and you're distracted, that's the problem, right? Like, and if you're weaving, I mean, I don't think they need a new law, but I don't disagree with it per se, but...
What I do disagree with is just the catch-all nature of such a law. Like, who doesn't have a coffee in the vehicle? Who doesn't adjust their volume on their radio or find a new station?
Or, I mean, if you're diabetic and you need sugar, so you take a sip of your sugar drink and then get a ticket for distracted driving, well, what was more dangerous? You going into a diabetic coma or something, or, like, having a sip of your sugary drink,
Exactly. So... I really dislike the shoot first and ask questions later nature of some of these laws, and like you said, Gavin, they just charge you, and then the onus is on you to fight it. And I recall like years ago, I got a parking ticket in Waterloo, and it was $35, and it's $35. It's not the end of the world. And then, of course, on the back, it's like, well, if you dispute this, then, you can set a court date. I'm like, well, I got to take half a day off work now for $35. I'm just going to lose money. So, obviously, the fee structure is set in such a way that it's cheaper for you to just pay the fine than it is for you to
I've had many fines like that where, like, there's only allowed to park during this time and that time or whatever. Yeah. So I parked, and I look at the sign, I read it, and like, okay, I'm good. I'm parked between that. It doesn't say anything else. 6 houses down is another sign that has a different set of laws that I'm supposed to follow as well. I would just assume that sign says the same thing, like all the way down the block, right?
Of course.
Like they usually do. So I don't read that one, but that one says that, I need to, fucking turn my wheels left instead of, like something stupid, right? Like, so I get a ticket for that, and I'm looking and standing in front of my car, in front of the sign, I'm like, I'm doing everything that this sign says. Why do I have a ticket? So then I go and read the other sign. I'm like, okay. But yeah, it was $30. It wasn't worth it for me to go fight it. But I'm out $30 now. But I'm going to be out $100 or more to go fight it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's just not worth it financially for me. Sometimes, you've got to do those things to prove a point, but
Sure.
I'm
Well, I'll
not.
tell you what. If you had deep enough pockets, then you could like countersue for your lost wages, right? But who
Yeah,
has
but
that kind of time?
yeah, I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess I don't know. This one might be a piece of good news for residents of Ontario. The whole thing's a scam to begin with, but the nuclear plant charge comes off your hydro bill if you live in Ontario now. So you'll see a reduction of $5.60
Yeah, but aren't they jacking our rates 8% anyways, though?
on
Yeah.
top of the 8% they just jacked them. On top of the 70% they're up over 10 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, but yay, $5.
Yay, $5.
It's like they took one of the barbs off the whip, but they're
Yeah.
still like flaying the flesh
Not,
off your back.
not even a big one, just like a little tiny one that's probably been worn down over the years. Yeah.
Yeah. So
From striking bone so many times.
Yeah.
I guess we're no longer paying to defray the cost of nuclear plants that we've had for 30 years in this province.
Well, that's good.
So, unless you're a business, businesses still get to pay them. So, go team.
There aren't
Man,
very many left in Ontario.
Fewer and fewer.
Yeah, I gotta stop being a business owner. This isn't looking very good for me.
Tell me about it. Let's go out to the right coast and talk about New Brunswick. The government of New Brunswick is going to ban the sale of flavored tobacco products, including menthol. But not only are they going to ban menthol like cigarettes and stuff, they're going to go one step further. They're going to prohibit the sale of e-cigarettes and e-juices to people under the age of 19.
I mean, I'm okay with that part of the law. Like, I don't think if it's already illegal to smoke, you shouldn't be able to fake smoke unless you're of age to smoke. I mean, I'm fine with that. But the flavored, man, I smoke cherry pipe tobacco. So if I'm out there and I want to get some cherry pipe tobacco, I'm shit out of luck. I mean, I'm an adult. I should be able to make that decision.
Well, I understand it's a complex issue because when you have a publicly funded healthcare system, then the onus does fall on the government to regulate potentially harmful behavior, that would cost the system money. So I get that, but I am a free market libertarian. I think that people should be free to, purchase what they want and do what they want as long as they're not harming others. And I think that, people should be free to make informed decisions even if they're bad ones.
The part that baffles me is it's not like they're banning e-cigarettes or tobacco product. It's just the flavored stuff.
But that's because they feel it appeals to teens.
Yeah.
But, I don't know any teenager that was like, oh God, I have got to have these menthol cigarettes.
I don't know anybody, that was like, oh man, I'm smoking now like 3 packs a day. If it weren't for those like rum and wine Colts, I never would have started smoking.
That smoke that stuff are old enough to smoke anyways. And if there's already a law in place to stop people that are underage smoking, shouldn't that be enough?
You would think, but apparently in New Brunswick you're not smart enough to think for yourself when it comes to smoking.
What I don't get is they're half-assing it. It's like if government policy is that smoking is bad for you and it costs the state money, then just ban it outright and move on.
Well,
I don't understand the whole half measure.
And that's my stance on it as well. Like, if you're gonna make it so difficult for somebody to do something, like you can't smoke in your car if you have kids, you can't smoke if you're within 10 feet of a door, you can't smoke on a patio at all now. You can't smoke, in your own home sometimes in some places if you don't have kids. And now flavored tobacco too? I mean, you may as well just ban it outright. Like, it's getting so difficult to enjoy a cigar or something now. Like, what's the point? You may as well just ban it.
It's just the government trying to have it both ways. Like Andrew pointed out, they're drunk on the tax money. And, so it's probably going to be the way it is for eternity. But they're also trying to appease the anti-smoking crowd by saying, look, we're making efforts to stop young people from smoking.
Yeah, because, we all know how effective laws are at stopping people from doing something, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, let's go into something lighter. There are changes to the Canadian Armed Forces. In 2015, the Canadian Army reverted to historical titles and divisions. So for the people that are not in the know on how that works, up until recently, from call it the end of the 60s until last year, the Canadian military worked in land force groups. So you had like Land Force Central was Ontario, Land Force West was like BC and Alberta. They reverted to their World War II designations, their pre-unification designations. So the Canadian Armed Forces was unified into a single group from the Royal Navy, Air Force, and Army in 60-something, 67, 68. One of our military listeners...
I think.
69. One of our military listeners will yell at me for getting this date wrong, because I know it was the end of that decade, but I don't remember the year. So send your feedback. I'll do push-ups. It's fine. We'll work it out. Somewhere there's a sergeant major that's angry with me. That's not news. But they are going back to the division system. So now you have a colored shoulder tab and a number. So I think in Ontario we're 4 division and we get a green shoulder flash now. Or again, depending on how you look at that. They're also restoring the British PIP rank structure for officers, so no more bars. The uniforms are changing over from sleeve bars to shoulder pips again. So, hooray for everybody that knew how to read officer ranks! You get to learn again.
But isn't it the same number of pips as the same number of bars, or?
Yeah, pips and crowns work out that it's basically the same as thin bars and thick bars. Because the Army can't make anything easy for anyone.
Yeah. But they can't make it too difficult either.
You can't make it too difficult, that's right. They're also returning the metal bilingual shoulder designations to say what your job is, and the traditional trade names. So they'll be... Privates will still be privates, but they'll also be whatever their historic trade name is. So people that build stuff will be referred to as craftsmen. People that are in the infantry will be referred to as riflemen. People that do other jobs will have their... engineers will be sappers. All of those historic titles, which, I don't know, the cost of doing this is not insignificant because you have to issue everyone new slip-ons.
Everything, yeah.
Well, not new everything. You take your existing uniform and your DEUs, your distinctive environmental dress. So that's the CAD-PAT look and the relish
like your
green
pants,
thing.
your jacket. But yeah, the little
They changed out the little slip-on.
The epilogue that now is on the front. You've only got one.
Yes. Well, the cost savings.
But
so you change out everybody's.
They did that to save cost, but now they're going to issue new ones to everybody.
That's right. That's exactly it. And they've also gone to the high-vis system. So they were a subdued, like olive on.
Yeah.
Arid CAD-PAT and coyote on desert CAD-PAT.
Yeah.
And so now they're going to the high-vis system, so it's going to be like, I think the CAD-PAT ones are bright white, and I don't remember what the Arid ones are, maybe black.
Yeah.
So everybody gets new slip-ons, everybody's fancy dress uniforms gets new sleeves if you're an officer. Fortunately, we don't have a ton of officers, because we have a really small military. But, I don't know, the historic part of this is kind of cool. The Army's going back to the way things used to be. Not that anybody that's in the Army now would have been in the Army during unification in the 60s, because, 50 years later. But, I don't know, it sounds kind of neat. Everybody's going back to their historic designations and rank structure.
Yeah, I kind of like that idea. But yeah, like, they could have just rolled that out slowly, and that when you need a new one, you get the new designation, I guess.
Yeah. And you know that they didn't arrive at this decision.
Oh no, this was a multi-million-dollar, multi-year.
Millions of dollars spent studying, the implementation. How many dozens of people in some kind of committee discussing this on end, and they rented out office space to do it, and they probably had whole staffs, take the minutes.
Oh yeah, catered lunches and.
Yeah, it. How many millions of dollars was spent arriving at this decision? How many millions of dollars will be spent implementing it? And what? How many millions of dollars need to be spent on our men and women abroad, so that they can do their jobs in the most efficient manner possible, so they can come home on their own 2 feet. I hate to see money wasted on things that are trivial in the grander scheme of things. When people are getting sent into combat zones with inadequate training, they don't have enough trigger time or outdated equipment. Yeah.
No, I mean, it's cool. I think they should never have really changed it. I mean, especially since, our military, for how young it is, has some pretty significant events in history that really, I think shaped our country and all of that.
And I think that's actually a good point that you bring up, because they should have never changed it in the first place, because this means that we're now having paid for it to be changed twice. once to the way it is now, and then now to revert it back.
Yeah. And then probably in 50 years, we'll go back to the way it is now and be like, this is the retro thing to do, so let's, yeah. And then keep going back and forth between them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I got mixed feelings about this one because I mean I like that they're going to that historical connection that you
Yeah.
can have that. You're in the fourth division. The fourth division was the group that
Yeah.
parachuted into Holland on D-Day.
No, exactly. And I think
that
that's
part of it
important,
is
right?
kind
Like,
of
that's
exactly.
fucking cool.
It is, and it gives the young soldiers that sort of esprit de corps because we have a regimental structure in this country that is unique in the Commonwealth and unique amongst modern First World armies. The regimental system is inherently a British system of governing a military, but the Canadian regimental system is different from the way every other Commonwealth runs their military. So each regiment, each group of soldiers has a very unique, almost family history sort of a story to them. So each division
Yeah, and I think
has their...
it's good to preserve that. I think like I said, like I mean, the Canadian military, like World War I and II, did some pretty significant things. That it's kind of cool to be linked to that and be like, yeah, it's not me, but like my group that fucking did that, like and I come from that heritage, so that's fucking awesome. But yeah, the money wasted to do that when they should never have changed it, because yeah, like you said, they've wasted the money twice now.
All right, let's hit the next one. So this is going to be, as my show notes crash. This is the
Electoral reform.
Yes,
No?
the electoral reform, which is actually two articles: DefendDemocracy.ca and the Globe and Mail. So the Globe and Mail has a particular slant, and Warren Kinsella has a different slant. Neither of them would be especially to the right of the things, but that's okay. You guys have heard about this, right? They want to change the way... I shouldn't say they. The current Prime Minister of our country feels that he has a mandate as the ruling party to change our electoral system based on something that he said at a campaign stop that ended up being a talking point on the back of a pamphlet that's buried about 10 pages deep into the Liberal policy for the election for this past election, where they said that this would be the last election where they used the first-past-the-post system.
Yeah, I actually we talked about this on my podcast after the Liberals won the election back in October, and yeah, it is. It's not even It's not even on the first page of their policy book. They have like a 32-point plan, for this mandate, and it's like number 16 or 17. It's just buried right in the middle. And I have mixed feelings about it. I do agree with some of the points raised in one of the articles, in that while it was in their policy book, he's right. Only a handful of people would have actually read it, and they were people who probably were going to vote Liberal anyway. They didn't really make it an election issue, so simply being elected doesn't really count as Canadians endorsing that particular point. And even so, I crunched the numbers a while back, and really only about a fifth of Canadians actually endorsed the Liberal Party to govern the country. So it doesn't even count, even if they all knew what they were voting for, which they did.
Can we expand on that part? Because you brought up something that was really important that I want to talk about, is that even if the people that voted this in wanted this change, if it's that big of a deal, why won't they let it go to a referendum and let everyone vote on it?
Because they won't win.
I know they won't win, but that's if it's that big of a deal. Like if the Liberal Party of Canada has a mandate to change the way that our government works and the fundamental form of democracy in this country, why will they not put it to a referendum? Is it because it lost the referendums in Ontario and Quebec in the last 5 years? Maybe that has something to do with it, because they wanted to eliminate first past the post at the provincial level in at least 3 provinces in this country in the last 5 years, and it's failed every time? Maybe.
Well,
I would like to ask the both of you what you consider to be the pros and cons of the electoral system that they are advocating for.
Well, I mean, I'm not necessarily a fan of what we currently have, because, I mean, like you said, like it really doesn't represent the country as a whole, despite the fact that they have a massive majority. What I don't,
Yes, 1/10 of 1% less than the Conservatives had, or 1/10 of 1% more than the Conservatives had. Is there?
But that's the problem I have with it, is that they were like, boo Conservatives when they're doing it this way, boo, boo. But now that they have the majority in, they're using it to their advantage to push this agenda to change it. I think any changes to our electoral system and how we govern our country should be put up for a referendum, straight up.
Yeah, I don't see how you can not have this as a referendum issue. You can't
I'm
change
certainly
the way a
not a
country
fan
votes.
necessarily of first past the post, but that's currently what we use. And if they want to change that, to do that responsibly, they need to put that up so that every Canadian has the opportunity to vote on that and make a decision, because it affects all of us and how we elect people that represent us. Like,
So part of that, you asked about pros and cons, Tyler. Part of that, Gavin, that comes to my mind is with first past the post, at least we have local representation at the federal level.
yes.
I didn't vote for my MP. I don't particularly care for my MP. She doesn't return my calls and she won't have a meeting with me. But
I think
well,
if
she
she
doesn't.
sees this, she's not going to...
Preach. Mine ignores me too.
Yeah,
No,
this is the
I
thing.
saw
Mine
your
is a
post
new
about your
MP.
MP calling you asking for money, so they don't ignore you. They ask you when they want money.
That's true. That wasn't an MP though. That was some
Oh, well.
like staffer in BC.
But his representative in a roundabout way, I suppose.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, theoretically, I prefer the idea of having local representation because it's somebody that should be someone that I can go and see when democracy is working. I should be able to show up at the constituency office and say that, Miss, what's your name? I have a concern. I want to talk to you about this thing, and she should be able to listen to my point of view. And if there's enough people in the community that go to her with something, that's how she should vote on it because that's what her community wants. That's not actually how our democracy works because our democracy is broken. But
that's how it should, yeah.
Right. If it worked the way on paper, if it worked in reality the way it was described on paper, that's what should happen. And first past the post lets me do that. Proportional representation does not let me do that. I don't get local representation, at least not in any form that anyone's been able to show me, because how you divide up the country based on everyone voting and there not being ridings, like you don't have, no one can show me a local representation model for that method.
Yeah.
What's the other method that they're proposing? Proportional representation, and there was one other one.
I think they proposed having like a weighted ballot where you would vote for your number one choice and your second and third choice.
No, screw that, because all you're going to end up with is runoff elections. You're going to have the places that we're going to vote the big majority winner
You're gonna have
ridings.
too many ties and...
Yeah. It will just increase the cost of government.
Yep. If you were going to have a riding that was decidedly NDP, it's still going to be decidedly NDP in a weighted ballot system, because they're going to total up all the number ones and the NDP are going to win, and that's it.
Yeah, or if they're going to do that and then if there's a tie and they go to Thunderdome, I would be behind that.
You know what? Because I have been asked why I am not in politics, and the reason that I am not in politics is because duels are illegal in this country.
Yeah. Although,
Because I would
Yeah.
absolutely run for MP if I was allowed to. You know what? I don't agree with you. You don't agree with me. Okay, fine. We're at an impasse. Yeah. I challenge you to
Pistols
fisticuffs.
at noon, yeah.
Exactly.
If I ever ran and got in, I'd try and create like an online TV show where I would just go from like department to department, like kicking in doors and firing people who are useless. And then each episode would end with me like personally writing a check to pay for the door. But I don't think that would fly. As soon as the first person got smashed in the face with the door, then it would be over.
Yeah, there's liability issues there. You got to get some serious insurance.
But I mean,
I don't know.
Like, ideally, some sort of hybrid system where you get the first pass of the post for your actual local representation, but then if we could actually vote, like they do in the States for who's gonna run the country. So you could get, like, because sometimes it's like, I want
elect
this party
your chiefs of
locally.
police, elect your judges.
I mean, I think it gets a little ridiculous
If we could
sometimes
elect
when
our
they're
police representatives, that would be the best thing we could do in this country. If we had sheriffs...
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it gets a little ridiculous when you drive down in the States and, like, the elections are on and they have, like, your deputy of this, your coroner, your this, that. Like, it's like every job is up, and you're like,
District
okay, that's
28
a much.
comptroller.
Yeah, but, like, I mean, if we could elect our local MP separate from our prime minister, I think that would be pretty epic.
I don't disagree with you, but that is a very fundamental change to the parliamentary democracy that we currently live under.
So is anything else that we do, though.
But that's what's on the table right now. That's
Yeah.
what's being discussed. So
Yeah.
what better time than now to talk about the options?
I don't disagree with that, but that's not what the current governing party is talking about. They're talking about still having a parliamentary democracy and just having a different way of deciding which party gets in power. They're not talking about separation of powers and having like an upper and lower house. I mean, we have the House of Commons and the Senate, but we don't have like an upper and lower house.
I don't even need an upper and lower. I mean, I'd be fine with just voting in the local guy, and if that's the party that happens to get the majority, that's fine, but they don't determine who the prime minister is.
Yeah.
You know, like, because, I mean, I voted conservative, but, man, I couldn't stand Harper. Like,
I
didn't want
that.
him. So it would have been nice to be able to, like, vote separately and be like, all right, so I would love for the conservatives to have the majority of the seats, but if I could vote in whoever else is the actual prime minister that's going to go and talk to people, but still be bound by these other parties that have a majority.
So we do kind of have that, though, but it requires people to be a lot more involved in politics because the head of the party is determined by the party. So in order to determine who the head of the conservatives are, you have to be a member of the Conservative Party and show up to caucus and then so on and so forth. Yeah. Well, and I mean, there are people that are involved in their riding associations that are involved in different provincial or federal parties that have that sort of say. I guess they have a vote in it at some point, but the average Canadian does not, because the average Canadian doesn't get involved in politics.
You know, the average Canadian, frankly, doesn't have time for it because they're too busy trying to pay their 50 and 60% taxes just so they have enough money to have food on the table.
Well,
you know?
Okay, so that's my next point. If we're gonna fundamentally change the democracy of our country, can we not just eliminate parliamentary democracy and go to just strict democracy? Everybody gets a vote. Just do everything through referendum. No more representation.
Man, with the internet and Survey Monkey, you could totally do that already.
Actually, the technology makes it a lot more feasible than it would have been
2015. Why are we not doing that?
Yeah, exactly.
Now, hold on. We've thrown a lot of cons down. What are the pros? I mean, I have got one pro, and that's I've had, especially with gun owners, I have a lot of discussions over, you know, who you should be voting for and who we should be throwing our weight behind, where your money should be going. And the issue of strategic voting always comes up.
I hate strategic voting.
If you do have like a mixed member proportional representation system, then the notion of strategic voting goes out the window because you just get a representative body and now no vote is considered wasted. Right. And I do find that interesting, and I would like to see a system, and this is where I cross paths with you, Andrew, and that there is no model that has been presented to me for a mixed member proportional system that makes sense. Because if in order to have a mixed member proportional system, you don't have that direct accountability where you're actually voting for somebody and then you could subsequently fire them.
Right.
You know, like there's no way they can lose. Like who determines whether they run or whether they make the panel or not? You know, Liberals win 35% of the vote. Who determines which people get to occupy those 35% of the seats?
Yeah, the Liberal caucus through their riding association.
Exactly.
I guess they don't have riding association, right?
Yeah,
so
it becomes like a delegated thing. It's appointed, and there's like a big chain, and every link in that chain, you lose accountability.
It would work like the Senate at that point, right? Like you would just have people that would be appointed by the party leader.
And I have huge problems with the Senate. I think that whole building should just be leveled and the gold melted down. And
I've been there. I really like the Senate building. I just wish it was empty.
Exactly.
They could put something out. They could put a bar in there.
No, it's a really nice building. Like the artwork is nice. There's like these big arches and stuff. It's a beautiful building. I just wish there weren't anyone in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, they could put a bar in it, a movie theater.
They should put like a shrine to Thor in there. Personally.
Yes. I could get
I just admiring your Mjolnir. I picked this one up. I don't know if you can see it. I picked this one up in Oslo about 7 years ago.
Nice. Yeah, I have another one that I wear sometimes that I picked up when I was in Stockholm. But this one I actually had made for me. There's a company called American Heathen that makes these. They also make like paracord bracelets with that as the clasp and some other stuff. Very cool stuff. But
that is cool.
Check them out.
Cool.
Yeah, it's even engraved on the bottom with runes. If you can
Can't quite make it out.
But yeah, it says Asatru in runes.
Nice.
But yeah, American Heathen.
I'll check it out. Check your show notes, people. It'll be in the show notes.
I'll put it in the show notes as long as I remember to put it in the show notes. American Heathen. All right, yeah. No, I'm okay with that. I mean, if we're gonna not have if we're not gonna have true separation of church and state, I want my church there too.
No, that's fair. I mean, but if they're gonna make changes, I want every Canadian to be able to have a say.
Well, I think that I don't understand why in 2015, pardon me, in 2016, we moved forward a year, just in case the PM staff is listening again this week.
Yeah, get with the times, Trudeau.
Now, tell the guy.
Yeah, but that excuse is no longer valid anymore, so I'm okay with that.
I don't know if you guys saw this. Right after he said that, I found this old article on The Onion from, 2002 that said the same thing, and it was because it's 2002, and yeah, that is not a valid reason. I don't understand.
It is a great reason until the year changes, yeah. Which it does every year.
Every year, yeah. Yeah, I don't...
Although, have you seen the photo floating around where it's like an AR receiver with the safety selector, and on safe it's 2015, and then on fire it's 2016, and it's in the 2016 position?
Yes. It is a good... I think it's a Photoshop, but it is a nice looking engraving.
Yeah.
One.
Yeah, you should totally do that. Now, if only there was a 2017 on that.
A little bit of rock and roll action.
Yeah. One day, right? One day.
Yeah, maybe. Depends if we have proportional representation or not.
Yeah.
Do we have anything else to bash the government about, or the future government, or anyone else?
What about this backdoor gun registry nonsense?
Oh, we want to talk about Quebec. Yeah.
Not even Quebec. I mean, they're trying to push that across the country now. I mean, Quebec is pushing on its own, but, I mean, there's a liberal mandate to get gun shops to register guns. Not gun owners, but gun shops when you get a new one.
So guns are already registered, at least in the province of Ontario, in the ledger book that the CFO gives you as part of your operating a firearms. What is it? It's not a federal firearms license, but it's
just a business
firearms
license.
Business license, FBL. That's the one.
I thought Blaney passed a regulation that actually prohibited the CFOs from making that a condition of their firearms business license.
My understanding from talking to at least 2 different FBL holders is that is not true.
Okay.
Now, maybe it varies by who your FBL is and stuff, or what rules they choose to enforce.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, what they're trying to do now is not, because they're not calling it a gun registry, because they said they wouldn't do that. But if we all walk into a gun store to purchase a new gun, we will do exactly the same thing we do, show our license and pay our bill and walk out with it. But then it's up to the gun shop to register that gun as sold to us.
Exactly. Andrew, I'm sure you've been to the gun room. Have you ever purchased a firearm from them?
I have only purchased restricted firearms there, so that is probably a bad example.
Well, the process for both restricted and non-restricted is the same in that store, and they break out that big book, and they turn it over to you, push it across the glass counter, and say, sign here. And they filled out your firearms license and the gun description and its serial number. So that gun is registered as having been sold to you as the initial purchaser. Whether that's restricted or non-restricted, then of course if it's restricted, then the registration follows the actual owner. But for non-restricted purposes, that's the only record that's kept. Once you then go to sell it privately, it's gone into the market.
Yeah, when I've purchased my last several, I paid cash. So I mean, I walk into the store, I show them my license. The guy looks at it for 2 seconds to determine it's real. Put it back in. I get a bill of sale that has the serial number, but I paid cash.
Yep.
So my name's not on it.
Yep.
It's mine.
That's actually how I got my 858 way back. The Gun Center, which I think is closed.
The Gun Center is now a comic book store.
That's unfortunate. But so that store's gone now. But I got my 858 from them, and this was, I don't know, maybe 6 months after the long gun registry was killed. And I paid cash and flashed my license. Yep, good. They just looked at it, checked the expiry, checked the photo, took my cash, printed me off a receipt. Didn't even have the serial number on it. It just showed cash tendered, change, whatever. Get out of my store.
Yep.
Yeah, and I mean, I get a business tracking inventory.
Uh-huh.
I have no problem with that. I mean, that's how we do inventory in my warehouse. We have serial numbers on important things, so if something goes missing, I can track that
Yep.
in my location. Once
Mhm.
it's sold, I don't give a shit.
Yep.
Especially if I have no legal obligation to do so. It's out of my place, I don't care.
For sure.
Yeah, and I think that's the same, and it seems like they're trying to do that. But yeah, the Quebec thing as well. Like, we've already shot this down and said that you can't do this, but they're going to keep trying.
Well, so the Quebec thing,
Like,
I don't understand how the. Actually, I take that back. I know exactly how this. The province of Quebec needs to understand that they cannot circumvent federal law. But the province of Quebec doesn't seem to understand that on any topic, so why they would expect that
that's
with
because it
firearms?
wasn't told to them in French, probably.
Well, no, it was the problem was it was told to them in the same size French as it was in English.
No.
Mm.
The problem is that they've been coddled for 30 years, and it's basically given it's created a political culture where they think they can challenge the federal government, where they think they're equal to the federal government. Some of the language from the federal government, previous governments has basically recognized Quebec as like a nation within Canada, and they quite frankly act that way in a lot of respects. Now, like obviously, Andrew, Sean Bevins, he actually he's an Ontario native and moved to Quebec during the Quebec separatist heyday back in the mid '90s, thinking that these people, they want the federal government off their backs. These are my kind of people. They just want smaller government and less government involvement in their lives. And then, sure enough, they didn't separate, and now he fell in love with a French woman and married her, and now he's stuck there.
Yeah, I mean, like, I love Quebec. I just hate the stupidity that I guess seems to come out of there every now and again.
And it's so unfortunate because if you're tied in with the firearms community in Canada, look, it's got to be 40% of the names that come up on your Facebook feed are French. Like,
oh, I know
there are great, solid people in Quebec.
I mean, I think it's really funny because I mean, this whole firearms tactical community and everything across the country and everything, it's so small. Like, you get into one group, you become friends with someone, you're like, oh hey, they're already friends with everybody I know. Like,
yeah. You go hover over like Andrew's name, and you go, we got 87 friends in common.
Because everybody knows everything.
Everybody knows everybody.
Yeah.
I don't know hardly anyone in my Facebook. I don't know how many hundreds of friends I have because I just accept everyone. If you want to be my friend on Facebook, I'm your friend on Facebook.
Yeah.
But
I have no concerns,
Yeah,
if the government was going to spy on me, why would they resort to social media?
Facebook password if they want it.
Yeah, they'll plant bugs in my house, like whatever. Like I got
I'm
nothing
friends
to
with
hide.
everyone on Facebook. I don't care who's going to be my friend on Facebook. But
yeah, I'm not worried.
every time I see somebody new add me, I'm like, oh, Bobby Pierre wants to add me. Bobby Pierre and I have like 90 friends in common. I don't know 87 people out of that 90. I've never met them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was just made admin of this Facebook group that's like a 3% Ontario kind of deal, right? And a bunch of people, because I was made admin, started like adding me as friends. Most of those are all mutual friends with you guys already. It's really funny. I was like,
shocking.
So once you get into this gun community and everything, it's just funny because everybody already knows everybody.
Yeah.
Like, it's a small world.
Wow.
So anyway, big waste of money on Quebec's front, and you know what? I think it's a political game because they know they can't win, but then they can turn around and I guess if it's always been this way in Quebec. Most of the gun control pushes seem to come from Quebec.
Well, to be fair, I mean that is where they had like our one significant event, so
yeah,
it does hit home a little more. But
a century ago, it's time to let it go.
And to be fair, a lot of the restrictions placed on guns do not affect the particular rifle that was used in that event, which is
awesome. I gotta own one of those.
Like,
you know what?
One thing that they had
so expensive.
Yeah, but I mean, you could legally take a Mini 14 and put a AR pistol mag in it and have 10 rounds.
Really? I thought they used a very specific.
Yeah, they have a proprietary mag.
Yeah,
that was. Can't you get them that use the
maybe there's an
standard
adapter, but I looked at buying a Mini
USDI.
14 specifically to make people annoyed with me, because that's basically how I choose my guns. As you can see, the blacker and scarier they are, the more often they end up on my wall of guns back there.
You can kind of see my
certainly
SR556
do.
upper behind me.
They
Yeah, exactly.
certainly do. I've even got a flashlight on mine so I can annoy people at night.
And everyone busts out their firearms. No, I thought Mini 14s had a proprietary magazine system. If they don't, I mean, I'm that much closer to buying one.
I guess there's so
Off the
many
shelf
models
they do.
of them, right?
No,
Sure.
off the shelf they use the proprietary Ruger mag, but I'm sure there's an adapter out there because the Ruger mags are more expensive than typical AR magazines. Like they're plentiful, they're available, they're cheap.
Oh, especially
And,
I mean, you can buy USGI mags for nothing. Like,
Yeah, 10
anywhere
$20.
$5 to $10 in the United States.
yeah.
I bought a handful when I was in the U.S. at this Pennsylvania gun shop, and I just riveted them before I came back across the border.
Smart man.
Yeah. Don't want to do that after you cross the border.
Yeah, no, that's a felony. Don't do that.
Yeah. Although you probably look like an idiot doing that in the States. Everyone's like, why is he drilling that mag?
Yeah. 5 30-second drill bit, people. Keep one of those on hand, just in case.
Just in case. All right. Do you guys want to talk about university students and things that are dumb?
Always.
Sure.
Yes.
I was a university student and dumb once.
I was a university student and still dumb.
Yeah.
So, University of BC. I don't know why this is in the South China Morning Post, but apparently it's an English language newspaper that I'd never heard of. I looked the writer up. He seems legit. He's got a bunch of articles published under his name. The article in the South China Morning Post is, "We trolled so hard we became real." This is...
Brilliant.
This is about the University of British Columbia's White Student Union. So I'm just waiting for the Facebook comments to start calling me a racist any minute now as they roll in. So I thought this all started as a hoax after the whole hashtag Black Lives Matter post-Ferguson stuff in the States, where some university students or people that claim to be university students were setting up social media groups, white student unions, whatever, that were sort of satirizing the Black Lives Matter movement.
Mm-hmm.
But apparently, University of British Columbia, they actually went to the next level and made it a real thing. And they're really a student union. And yeah, they have a board of directors and there's founding members, and they actually have a white student union there. And
I mean, I guess as a white man, I mean, I have a certain opinion and all of that, right? And I have a certain bias built into that. So I freely admit that. And I guess depending on what their intentions are with it, I don't have a problem with it. Because if anyone is allowed to have their own inclusive union, everybody should be allowed to have their own, thing.
right.
Exactly. You've got this environment of race-based politics that's quite frankly originally created by white people, because at the time white people were the only people who actually had actual meaningful political representation. And now in this kind of modern era, it seems the white people are the only ones who don't have an advocacy group at these various levels, whether it's an educational institution or on like a national level. And yeah, I kind of think like most people will just kind of chuckle when they see that, because it's just kind of something that they never hear about, right?
Yeah.
Because everybody always, whenever people criticize, black people for having Black History Month, for example, and then they'll say, well, you get the other 11. Right?
Yeah.
It's not really about it. It's not really that simple, because growing up in this kind of modern era, you can't help but go through the system and you're just getting chastised every step of the way. Oh, you're people.
Yeah, and I mean, the three of us are all straight white cisgendered males, so we are.
Don't you have to use a trigger warning for at least one of those?
Yeah, I don't do that.
We all kind of look alike.
This is my safety, so that's the only trigger warning you get. So, we are, the majority, we are the devil, and anything we do and say is going to offend somebody. And
Yeah.
I mean, I can respect that because like I that's the walk of life that I come from, so that's the viewpoint that I'm going to have. And as much as I try to respect everyone, I can't always see things from their viewpoint. It's impossible. Much like
Sure.
they can't see things from mine. Like I certainly acknowledge that because of my upbringing and everything, I have some privileges, but that doesn't always necessarily mean that they're readily apparent to me. Because
I wouldn't even say that they're
that's just
that they're
how I grow up.
Yeah,
Like,
I wouldn't even say they're necessarily race based either. I think that's a bit of a cop out.
exactly. No,
Yeah.
exactly. No, I mean, there's a lot, like, socioeconomical, all kinds of things that are built into that. But, like, I mean, I generally don't fear when I get pulled over by police. Is that because I'm a straight white male, this and that? I'm sure it's a combination of all
Could
of those
be.
things.
Sure.
So
But
I don't, you know, say that anyone that says, "Oh, because I'm this, I experience that," because I don't know. I don't come from that background. But I mean, if you're going to allow one group to have their exclusive community that's only us, you need to allow everybody to have that, so long as their intentions are pure and it's not done out of hate.
well, you know what? Like, I, I'm a free market libertarian, and I think if people are going to kind of like hoist themselves on their own petards and be assholes and create like a hate-based group, then the market is going to respond and shun them.
Yeah.
So whatever, let them hang themselves with their own rope. I don't really care.
Yeah.
But like let's throw this back to what we were discussing earlier about student loans. I remember going into the student loan office, and then they'd have this big advertisement from TD Bank, big national bank, international bank, and it says preference for this grant will be given to students of Aboriginal descent. And I'm just like, okay, well, sure, that's cool. But can you imagine if it said preference will be given to like white men or white people?
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
racist.
It's a total double standard. It's straight up racist. And as a free market libertarian, I'm obviously a fan of a meritocracy. It's just if you're gonna hire people for your business, do it according to merit. But at the same time, like I said, hey, hang yourself. I don't care. If you want to have an entire business where you just hire white people just because they're white, then the market is going to respond and say, hey, these guys are a bunch of dicks. Don't buy their products. Don't go there. Don't go dine at the restaurant.
In Arizona, when they had the big thing where they allowed business owners under the religious freedoms to put up signs that say that gay people were not allowed into their establishment.
Mm-hmm.
I think the way that they went about it, I mean, it was disgusting but brilliant.
Exactly.
But then the reaction to it, when it wasn't just gay people, but straight people that supported gay people that were like, oh, this guy has a store or a sign up on his door saying gay people aren't welcome, I'm not going to go. And within 2 days, they repealed that because they realized that all of these businesses were not making money because you had the entire gay population plus anyone that supported that just didn't show up, and they felt the monetary hurt from that immediately. I thought it was hilarious because they didn't consider that at the beginning.
Yeah, that's the market. Basically, that's regulating behavior, and you don't need the government to do it for you.
Yeah.
If your business conducts itself in an unethical manner, then the market will respond in kind, and they'll choose to buy, from businesses that conduct themselves in such a way that reflects your own personal values.
Yeah.
If you mistreat your employees, if you have these kind of like racist or sexist hiring practices, then people in large are probably not going to buy from you. And then there is going to be that small segment in society where they say, yeah, I want to buy my skateboard wheels from a company that only hires like white men. Well, okay, if there's enough of you and the market will bear it, then okay, then those little people, then they get to live the way that they choose to.
Yeah, they can buy from the white power bearing company. And
exactly. Then everybody's happy. But anyway, like when it comes to this political game, race-based politics is a big deal in this modern society, and I know it kind of started out as a joke, and the article title is very apt. But quite frankly, it's time white people caught on and learned to play the game.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's going to look bad if there's 3 white guys on the internet saying that there should be a white student union. But I mean,
there should be.
As long as it's done with the right intentions. I think it's the key part of it, right?
I don't think there ought to be any student unions. They ought to be there to learn or fuck off.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm also a firm believer of just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. right? Like, I mean, with all these, like, I mean, Texas getting the open carry and all that. Like, if you've got an AR strapped to your back with a thing with like 10 mags across your chest going through Walmart, sure, is it legal? But should you? Like, should you really?
Should you?
Like,
Yeah, I got mixed feelings about that. Like, I get they're trying to make a point, but yeah,
but
I
like
think
they're doing it to be in your face and shocking, right? And I think that's sort of like okay, yes, I get what you're saying, and if they're making this, group for white students to be like, meh, look at us, we're white, meh, I think that's the wrong reasons for it. But if they're doing it because they truly feel that there's a need to do it,
yeah,
then they should totally do it. And it's the same thing, right? Like, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
yeah.
But if there's a legitimate need or a space for that, then yes, totally. But that goes for anyone. If you think there should be a Chinese student union, a left-handed gay Italian, like whatever it is, right? Like, it doesn't matter. Just whatever.
Yeah, I get it. Like, form your own associations, do it on your own time. Sad thing is that student unions get funding from the university, and I would be shocked. I'd be shocked if I find out that the White Students' Union actually successfully manages to get funding from the university. I guarantee that the university will try and put roadblocks galore in their way.
Oh, probably.
But yeah, it's just kind of like I think the idea of whiteness is just as stupid as the idea of blackness, because it's not like there's a universal white culture or universal black culture.
No, exactly.
The single unifying umbrella of whiteness is probably like an ancestral link to Christianity, or if you want to go roll things back another 1,000 years to the various pagan religions. But otherwise, the cultural practices, the cultural practices of European peoples are very diverse. And to the trained eye, I know everybody says, "Oh, you all look alike," and that's the same. If you ask like a Chinese guy about different Chinese people he's looking at, he'll tell you like what region of China they come from.
Yeah.
And the same thing, you can look at Europeans, and you can, with a reasonable degree of accuracy,
for sure,
say, "Oh, this guy's Scandinavian, this guy's from Spain, this guy's."
Yeah, because we've all got genetic traits. Yeah.
But there's quite a great degree of diversity there, and the whole idea of just saying, well, screw everybody, we're under this umbrella of whiteness. Yeah, it seems kind of stupid, but
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I mean,
the whole thing is weird. I kind of liked the report from the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedom, because they actually rank all the universities like level of free speech with a letter grade. I have no idea who these guys are, but I read a little bit about this Justice Center for Constitutional Freedom. They do a lot of reports. I don't know who gives them money. I would love to find out.
Yeah, but I want that job. Can you imagine, like, you walk around a university and just, like, listen to people talk and, like, hear what they say and go, yeah, these guys are pretty free. A+.
No,
like,
that's the thing.
I heard somebody drop a C-bomb. Everything was fine. Nothing happened. Awesome.
They actually had. It's a giant report. I'll put the link in the show notes.
Oh, I read the thing that you posted.
But that's just the link to the summary of the thing. That they actually have like a multi-dozen page, like it's like 34-page report or something, about all the universities in Canada and how they assign them the letter grade and all of the statistics behind how they pick that. And I would love to know how they actually did the research, like the primary source data for this. But out of the whatever it is, 200 some universities in Canada, they give 8 of them an A. A being the highest on the scale of A to F, standard school letter grading system. Or for those people taking Common Core, that's A, B, C, D, and F. We skip one.
I wonder if they bell curved anybody. Like,
no, I don't think they did. I think like I haven't seen their primary source data, but looking at the report data, the filtered bit that I can see, like, this says that universities in Canada are not places that value free speech, which we already know because there's reports out of I forget the group that did the survey in the U.S. 60% of university students in the U.S. think the First Amendment should be banned. Canada is, for all intents and purposes, essentially the same as the U.S. Our culture is not remarkably different. So
no, you could take somebody from Regina and drop them in like Des Moines, and they would just disappear. They would just sound funny.
Yeah, so it's reasonable to assume that if you did the same survey in Canada, about half of the students here would say we don't need campus free speech if it upsets somebody, if there's a trigger word.
God.
Yeah, I know, often, right? But I can't believe 200 universities, 8 of them get an A.
I don't know. I think that's part of, like, people need to, like, I mean, you also, like, you know, part of being a decent person is realizing that maybe if I do this in public, it's going to piss some people off. But
I don't think enough university students actually get pissed off.
But yeah, like, I mean, that's all. I think we need just more common sense as a people, right? Like, we don't need all these laws and regulations and this and that and everything else. I think we all just need to, like, stop and think more, right? Like,
that's part of what I mean. That's the whole point of a post-secondary education, is so that you learn how to think.
Yeah.
Right? You've learned arithmetic and mathematics, and you understand the basics of, like, the world around you and how things work. And now you're there to do critical thinking, to become a valuable and contributing member of society, right?
Because university doesn't train you for anything, but it trains you to be able to think for yourself.
That's what it's supposed to do.
Yeah, that's not what it does.
It's not what it does, but that's what it's supposed to. That's what it's supposed to do.
As opposed to college is supposed to be practical, hands-on, like, job training.
Yeah, it's supposed to be.
Okay, so college in this country is a joke, because that's really what high schools are supposed to be for. But since we can't let people go to universities and high schools, because then some people will get an award for doing it and some people wouldn't, we have to have 2 levels of post-secondary education.
Yeah.
Before I destroy our education system in this country, the point of university, at its foundational level, why universities exist, is to provide critical thinking skills for young adults.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And if you're going to have safe spaces and trigger warnings, and you're what was the was it a Canadian university? I can't remember who it was. Somebody, I think it's a Canadian university, I want to say it's in Toronto, is replacing pronouns, he and she, with Z, the letter Z.
Yeah, it was in the States. I read that. It was Zim, Zum, and Zoo.
Yeah, because they don't want to offend anyone.
Which, like,
it's the English language. Like, I realize that our language evolves over time. That's why Merriam-Webster keeps putting new words in every year. Yeah. Even though I don't agree with them that twerking was a word last year, they still put it in.
It is now, though, because it's 2016.
So the whole way that they cite that is if a word appears in print like 3 times, it becomes like a word. But neither here nor there. That's just how dictionaries come up with new words. The point that I'm trying to make is the fact that they want to change fundamentally how we speak into some kind of weird, perverse form of doublespeak, specifically to not offend a subset of students who might have some sort of gender or sexual orientation difference from their peers, that they're so uncomfortable by being called he or she in a general way that they have to come up with a new word to describe things.
Yeah, and this is like, and this is my problem. We already have words for that. If people don't want to use he or she, we have they. So why create a whole other word?
Yep.
That, and I mean, I don't give a shit. If you want to be called she and you are biologically a he, I don't fucking care.
Yeah, that's your that's fine. Do your thing.
You appear as a man to me and I make a mistake and you would like to be called she. Don't get aggressive at me. I mean, it's one thing if I know you and you've told me 10 times and I still do it, then you have a right to get pissed at me. But
sure,
you obviously appear to be a man in a dress and I call you a he by mistake. Don't get angry and yell at me. If you politely go, excuse me, I would prefer to be called she, I would go, okay, I'm very sorry. I will from now on refer to you as she. That solves the problem right there.
Yeah, I don't really care. Just be happy and do your own thing. Not my problem. But when it comes to like rewriting history, when it comes to redefining what personal pronouns are, it's asinine. Like English Parliament actually debated one of these issues like hundreds of years ago, and that was like what pronoun was appropriate to use when the gender of a person was ambiguous, like when recalling a story or maybe telling like a hypothetical story in a situation where the gender isn't really necessarily declared. Like, oh, a doctor walks into a bar. And it was decided that because English lacked this gender neutral pronoun that still implied a person, that simply the masculine pronouns were to be used. And okay, tough titties. I mean, shit, maybe even that's sexist. I don't know, but it's
Yeah,
just
but even
it's
if
the
you
way it
don't
is.
even if you don't want to use that, even if like I said, we have they, them, like those are perfectly accept. Maybe they're not the official, parliamentary declared gender neutral
I
word.
demand you say he.
But like, I mean, how many times do you feel like, oh yeah, they were,
Yeah, I know what you mean. I know
Yeah.
exactly what you mean, and it's totally
there was someone
appropriate.
at the park and they were feeding ducks and they did this. It's like
Yep.
it's irrelevant what they are. Like
Yep.
you understand what you're saying because it gets the point across. So there are words that already exist that do that. Why are we going to create new ones that are just going to confuse it? Because I certainly don't want to be called Z.
It's a conspiracy to sell new editions of dictionaries.
Yeah, I'm quite comfortable being called he. If someone mistakenly calls me her, which I used to have long hair, so that's understandable why that may have happened, I would have politely corrected them and said, actually, I'm a dude, can you please refer to me as he? Problem solved. Who cares?
Right. But
Like-
that's because you're treating the problem like you're a rational and reasonable adult, and university students are neither.
Yeah.
The inmates are running the asylum.
Well, they are, though. They need safe spaces, and they need to have trigger warnings on classes, and they have to censor what's told to them, and they have to censor what they say to one another. And if you're going to go on a date and have sex with your significant other, you have to get consent in writing, because if you both get drunk, one of you ends up getting raped, but only the one of you with a vagina.
Yeah, that's the part that drives me nuts, because it's like, if you're both drunk, neither of you can consent, but all those commercials on TV are always showing the guy as the rapist.
Yeah.
And that may be...
this actually, you can roll this right back to the white students union thing. It's like you can do nothing right. There's nothing you can do to please everybody, and that's kind of one of the sources of frustration that might give people cause to flock to this type of union, because no one's sticking up for them.
Yeah,
right.
I think that's exactly why it is. I don't know if our listeners haven't had an opportunity to read the article. The 3 founding members, 2 of them are white. I'll leave it to your imagination what the other one is, but he's not white.
Yeah, he's Indian, like from East India.
It says Southeast Asian, but yeah, we can infer from the article of
Indian or
reasonable
Pakistani, Sri Lankan.
It's reasonable to infer that from the way the article is written.
Yeah.
So in other words,
Not
a level-headed
Oriental,
guy
yeah.
that sees the situation for what it is, completely absurd.
Yep, it is. But they approach the interviewer with such absolute stoicism that they believe 100%, and I think they actually really believe this. I don't think they're play acting and messing with people. I think they actually believe what they're saying, that they need equal representation in their student government at their university, because as people that identify as being white, whether they are or they aren't, that's what they identify as. They're not getting a voice.
I guarantee that is actually true.
Probably is. I mean, because they're so
guarantee
worried about appeasing every minority
Yeah.
that each minority will have one, which, I mean, not that they don't deserve one, but
Everybody is
hear-
equal, though. If you're going to treat
you need
everybody
to
equal,
hear
you have to
everybody's
treat...
voice. Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, Andrew, I'll buy you a case of beer if that student union is like majority white, or it is any way reflective of the ethnic composition of the university.
I want to give these students credit, because I want to see them just buck the system and be like, you know what, we see your shenanigans for what they are.
Yeah.
Here are our retaliatory shenanigans. Allow us to flip you the bird, and
Yeah.
we'll see you all at the next meeting.
And I would love to see them be like, now that we have this, we're going to celebrate Yule, and we're going to do all of these, like, European ancestry things, like, to show that it's legit, right? Like, and be like, oh yeah, we're doing this, so we're going to dance around the maypole and do all, like, all this other weird shit. Just to be like, oh, it's not that we're white, but we're representing our ancestry, which is what it's supposed to be all about, right?
The official language, like the working language of the union, should be like Common Germanic.
or Esperanto.
Yeah.
To bring that back.
All right, let's hit the last one and stop abusing the university students for a little bit. The last article, CTV News. Donate your tax return to the Ontario government. Or as I like to think of it, a whole big can of nope.
Yeah.
There ain't no way I'm doing that. No, nope,
Yeah,
nope, nope, nope.
Nope.
I mean,
They can
I guess,
find my tax return underneath my empty gun, which is underneath a pile of hot and empty spent brass.
yeah.
So
That's more or less where mine goes.
Uh,
If
I
I
don't-
even get one.
I don't know if you guys remember this, because you guys are more around my age. If we had Sean on or Jeff, they might be able to tell you when this actually came into effect, but there was a Conservative Prime Minister of Ontario 20 years ago that put a policy in effect that they said that you can donate your tax return to the provincial government, and I think it might end up as a further tax rebate the next year or something. It might not have. But it just ends up, it works out that it's a box on your tax return. And basically the history of it is the people that used it are using it as essentially as a protest model because they're getting such a minuscule tax return that it's like, screw it. I'm not getting $20 back. You may as well keep it, right?
Well,
So-
if it was like $20, I bet it would cost the government money to process it.
Yeah.
Like they would end up losing money having to deal with it.
So
If
over
that
the
was
last,
the case, I would do it.
well, so over the last 20 or 25 years, whatever it worked out to, I looked all the stats up for this the other day. They have had a few thousand people collect or check the box to return their taxes, and it's worked out to something like $100,000 in like 20 years.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess there's no harm in asking, right?
Right, which is what the Win Liberal government in Ontario is doing, is they're using
Right.
existing tax code that's been in place from a Conservative government for 20 years to say, if you don't want your tax money back, we'll gladly take it and spend it, because we know better than you.
Yeah.
So they're not making any new laws. It's a Conservative law that's been on the books for 2 decades, but in 20 years it's made less than $100,000.
Yeah, I mean, are they getting mine? No, they already get too much of my money. I mean, I remember one year I did my tax return that said that I owed, X amount of money, despite the fact that I get, like, money taken off of my check every 2 weeks to pay my taxes. So I pay it, and then, I don't know, a couple of months later, I get a check back from them saying that I'd overpaid. Then a couple of months later, I get another letter from them telling me that I owe them $200 because they'd like undervalued, and it was like, you just sent me money back. Like, I paid you. You then send me $100 back. You now are asking for $200 a few months later. Like, get your shit together, guys.
Yeah.
Like,
No,
So,
that's
yeah.
asking a lot for the government.
like no harm in asking, but no, they're not getting any more of my money because they can't get a budget. Like, do I get to ask them for my money back if I overspend?
Honestly, I would really like to see them make millions and millions of dollars on this from Liberal voting Ontarians' tax returns. But I don't think they're gonna, for the same reason that nobody's given them any money in the last 20 years.
Yeah.
It's not gonna happen. They're gonna be the odd person that's like, they don't care. It's such a small value, or they're
It's
just
not worth
that
it, yeah.
they're that altruistic. Because I found an article. I want to say it was in the Star. You know what? It was in the Star. And there was a fella, and it was from 2013, I think, and he was from Toronto, of course, and he had a tax return of like $1,500, and he said, and I'm paraphrasing the quote because I don't have the article in front of me, he said something to the effect of, the government can spend it better than I can. So there really are people out there that think
yeah. Yeah.
that. And Tyler shakes his head and gets a nosebleed.
God.
But I mean, like, that's most of the cost of
What
an
can you
FDR
say?
right there. I mean,
There really are people out there that are left-leaning and voted that way because they really are communists and really think that the government is better at spending their money than they are.
yeah.
But there's such a small number of them that they've given the government $100,000 in 20 years.
And you know
How
what?
much
Like,
money does it cost to administer this program over 20 years? Like, you think
I
even
bet
if
it's a lot more than 100,000.
if you're paying like one person like minimum 80 grand a year, minimum, it's a net loss, total waste of
Yeah.
money.
yeah, like I said, like,
Even just like the ink on the page, how much does that add up to?
I just
China,
gotta think of,
however many million people. over 20 years.
I just get stuck on the processing cost because, like, you're talking about, like, amounts that are so inconsequential. People don't care about them. And it's literally like an FU to the government. Like, you may as well keep it because it's not worth sending me a check for $10.
Exactly. Like, if anyone's getting, like, 20 grand back in their tax return, they need to talk to their tax lawyers. Like, because that's their
You're doing it wrong.
That's their money.
Yeah. That the government made interest on.
Yeah, so you have paid way too much, and that's the thing that I always find funny talking to some friends of mine. Like, they don't realize that that's their money that they're getting back. It's like, you've overpaid your taxes. That's why they're giving it back to you. Like, you shouldn't, like, I try to work it out so that I'm plus or minus $100 every year.
Yeah.
Right?
I think everybody that has a good understanding of our tax system tries to do it that way so that we don't end up owing them thousands of dollars.
But if I'm ever going to be in a position, I would much rather owe them money than have them owe me money, because at least then I've been getting the benefit of having my money in my bank.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Right? And I think a lot of people don't really look at it that way, which I think is a big problem. You know, I mean, yeah, it never hurts for them to ask for it, and it should just be a no-brainer. If I want to donate my tax return to the government, I should be able to do. Like, they shouldn't have to tell you that you can do that. Like, if I want to just donate any of my money to the government, I should be able to do that if I believe in them.
The time in high school that would have been allocated to explaining this principle to students has now been taken over by explaining students how they can safely shove a fist up their ass.
Okay.
That's important, though, because in all reality, like, how many of them are going to do that?
Can I have you guys back on? I would really like to do a show just about Ontario's new sex ed curriculum, because that's one of those things that's just like, I could spend an hour and still not understand it or articulate all of the points I have about it. It's kind of like the marijuana thing. Actually, to all of our listeners out there that are still listening, both of you.
We haven't offended by now.
for the
bunch
two
of racists, sitting there drinking, talking guns, and being white.
For the two other drunk white guys in the country that are listening to this.
Yeah.
If anyone is or knows an expert on marijuana and the pending legislation around marijuana, I know very, very little about weed. I would very much like to learn and do a show on it, because I don't understand it. Yeah,
I'm by no means an expert. I've dabbled, but I'm by no means an expert. But I could talk to some people, so I might be able to get somebody on the show, or at least to be able to answer your questions. They may not, given the changes that may or may not occur, they may not want to put their face on here. But
no, I would really like to. I would really like to find out from somebody. I mean,
a guy I know currently is a government authorized grower.
Perfect. Somebody like that would be ideal, because I would love to understand the regulation around the existing industry and the proposed changes to the industry.
Yeah, it will be like, I really don't give a shit one way or the other, like, whether they legalize it or not. Like, anyone that wants it gets it. Like, who fucking cares, right?
I mean, it's almost better that it remains illegal so the government doesn't get any tax money out of it.
But that's the thing, though, right? Like, if they make it legal, like, if they legalize it, but then it's only through government-approved growers, through government-approved retailers like the LCBO, and if I go buy it from my guy, well, they're still going to have to arrest that guy. So they haven't actually made it legal. And they're not going to save any tax dollars by not having to prosecute people that are just smoking pot, because you're still going to have to arrest people that buy it illegally, grow it illegally, sell it illegally. Yeah. So what's the point then?
Okay, so I need to put into my notes for future shows. We need to get the guy that grows the weed, and we need to get somebody on to talk about the sex ed curriculum in Ontario so that it can explain how there's a whole semester on fisting.
Yep.
It's hyperbole for those people listening. It's not a whole semester. It's like an afternoon.
But not as much of an exaggeration as you think it is.
That's what I mean. It is like an afternoon out of a 2-week program.
But yeah, and this is the funny thing. Like, I mean, and some of that stuff, like some of the stuff that they've put into that new sex ed thing, I do think is important. Some of it's maybe a little ridiculous and beyond, and a kid can figure out on his own on a Saturday afternoon.
No, yeah, I thought figuring sex out was part of the fun. You know.
You know, like, I mean, I certainly think they do need to do certain things, but you know, and the fact that like homosexuality, bisexuality, those are actual things that exist, rather than just like, nope, nothing to see here, folks.
Yep, move along.
Sex? What's that? You should practice abstinence. There's certainly things there are they do need to teach, but yeah, they maybe don't need to get into detail on some of the finer points, if you will.
Oh, I just look at it like.
But they should spend an afternoon on this is how you do your taxes. That's probably a little more important, right?
Students have a finite amount of time in school. They have a finite amount of time in school. There's only so much money to go around, and teachers are striking all the time. So anything that's taught in school has to come at the expense of something else.
Yep.
And so, like, I take a really critical look at the things that I was not taught in the Ontario curriculum. Like, when I graduated high school, I did not know how to file a tax return. I did not know how to, fill out a job application, write a resume, do a job interview. I didn't know how to apply for a mortgage. I didn't know how to, like, what to look for when shopping for a home. Like, these critical life skills, that pretty much everybody needs. And more about, some meaningless bullshit that you're never, ever, ever going to need in your life.
Well, exactly.
Like, if you pursue some sort of specialized career, in which case it'll be taught to you again.
Yeah. Well, exactly. Like, I mean, I remember in high school or whatever, middle school, I spent a whole month learning about Japan. And it was awesome. Like, we learned about another culture, and it kind of got me interested in it, and now I know how to use chopsticks, and we did all that, and it was awesome, right? However, maybe instead of spending a month, we could have spent a week and a half, 2 weeks even, and then that other 2 weeks, we could have learned how to do a tax return, how to do all that stuff you were talking about. Like, luckily my father's an accountant, so I learned how to do my taxes from him. And it's not hard, especially if you use the software that costs you like $20 a year. You sit down, you get your T4, you punch in, like, all the boxes are numbered, and you just transfer the numbers into that, and it does everything for you for $20 a year. Brilliant. But if no one's shown you how to do that, you don't know. Even if you get the paper form, it's still pretty fucking easy because it's exactly the same. You transfer the numbers over into the boxes that are labeled the same, then you do the calculation that it tells you, and it tells you how to do it. It's pretty easy, but to read lawyerese on that tax return form is ridiculous.
Yeah.
But yeah, all you need is someone to sit you down for 10 minutes, talk you through it, and you could do it. But nobody does that.
Like a basic example. Like, it obviously gets much more complicated than that when it comes to, like, how to save money in such a way where the government doesn't screw you.
Oh, for sure. But
it's
like,
very difficult to do.
The absolute basics of how to do a basic income for yourself for the month, like how much money do I have coming in versus how much do I going out? How do I do my tax return? How do I buy a house? How do I get a mortgage? All that stuff, they could probably take like a month and a half and teach everybody in their last year of school.
Yep.
And get it all, like, at least enough that you could survive, right?
Yeah.
They don't. I learned about Japan.
Yeah, so I just look at it from that, through that lens. I'm just like, everything comes at the expense of something else, and it's just really a question of priorities. Like, okay, it's all well and good. If maybe if you want to take, like, alternative sex shit, as an elective, but there are certain things that should be a part of the core curriculum that aren't.
Yeah, I
if you're
agree.
going to have a curriculum, the curriculum needs to have certain everyday applicable to 95% of the people that are there. That's why it's part of the core curriculum.
Yeah.
I have not once used calculus in my everyday to-day life. Not once. Ever.
I do computer science for a living. I don't use calculus. If I need to look up a formula, I have the internet. Every math teacher that was like, you have to learn how to do this without a calculator. I have 6 calculators in front of me all the time. I have
it's
my
the
phone.
real world. People have
my
computers
phone.
and calculators.
Exactly. Like,
exactly.
But mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. I know that. I don't need to know basic biology. I have nothing to do with that.
I use math every single day. I'm a general contractor, so anytime we have to fix something with regards to framing, math comes into play. Trigonometry comes into play. But I don't have to bust out the quadratic equation and fucking graph a parabola.
No.
Just to throw a 2x4 into a wall.
Well, and I'm sure if you ever got stuck at a job site going, shit, this guy wants me to make a fucking circle, probably get your fucking phone out of your pocket and Google that shit and figure it out, right? Like,
exactly.
Or you get this thing called on-the-job training, where they teach you how to do shit, right? Like.
Well, but that would defeat the whole post-secondary education system where you have your safe spaces and trigger words.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but I mean, like,
yeah.
I mean, it's not that we don't necessarily need some of that, but I think that people are getting a little too soft these days.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah,
absolutely.
that's so true. People are so soft that they need protection from words. And that makes me very afraid, for the future, because you've got an entire generation of people that have been coddled their whole lives, right through post-secondary,
Ah,
right, well into their adult lives, and of course, when it comes to firearms issues, now we've got people that are terrified by words. They're certainly going to be terrified by inanimate objects that
oh
would,
yeah.
of course, have the capacity to hurt them in the wrong hands. So that brings down the shitstorm of legislation
I
on
mean,
us.
just look at
And
that scary gun on the wall behind it. Like that's got a
uh,
like a what? Like a 5 magnification scope? You must be able to kill people from 10 kilometers away with that. Like easy,
Easily. At
easy.
least 10.
elephants at 10 miles,
Elephants. That's
headshots
right.
all day.
Like
Let's hit listener feedback before we rag on everything else some more.
aw.
I know. We're getting long, though. This is going to be a 2-hour episode easy. I do have lots of feedback for a change, though, which is why I kind of want to move on, because we have a lot of feedback.
Hopefully we'll get more now.
Well, you know what? We've gone up from... There's at least 3 more people drinking with us.
Excellent.
We're up to 5... Oh, no, something I said 4. We're up to 4 now. One of them left. Listener feedback. Email feedback. Again, email the show, feedback@CanadianPatriotPodcast.com. First email comes from Dave. Dave says, I really have liked what I've heard. I haven't even had that much to drink. I really have liked what I have heard on your podcast so far. I, too, was on the board of directors at my last gun club and an IDPA shooter, and love your topics on the show. Really liked your podcast with Sean Bevins, and would like to hear more from him. Good luck with the podcast. So we'd like to say thanks to Dave, and there will be lots more time with Sean Bevins. I'd like to try and set up a regular segment for him. We just had a little bit of a scheduling conflict this week. We would like to find out more about what's going on in the Magna Carta group and what they're doing. Tyler and I are both involved in that, so expect to hear lots more from Sean in the future. We also have YouTube feedback on episodes 2 and 3 from Mr. Bean YouTube. He says, love the podcast. Good job, guys. A very needed Canadian channel and podcast. Would like to thank him for commenting on YouTube and remind everyone else that they, too, can comment on YouTube. However, they can't live chat with us because YouTube hates me and hasn't been working for, like, the last 3 episodes. You can leave a comment, but you can't, like, interact with us live during the show. I can't fix it. It's YouTube. Talk to Google.
I tuned in like a few episodes ago, and I tried to leave like live commentary, and just it wasn't coming through. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's not just us. It happens. I've talked to some other people.
Did you have a beer in your hand at the time? Because that may have been the thing. If you didn't, it maybe didn't work. It didn't recognize that you were drinking.
Well,
You know
I
what it was?
usually have a beer in my hand, so if I didn't have a beer in my hand, that would most likely be the cause of the problem.
Well, there you go. Maybe that was.
If you work for Google and you happen to listen to us, if you'd like to fix our YouTube, I would appreciate it so people could leave comments as we do the show. If you don't work for YouTube and happen to be able to do that anyway, that's cool. Just don't tell anybody. iTunes feedback, because we are on iTunes for all of your listening pleasure. Well, not all of your listening pleasure, I hope, but we are on iTunes. We have feedback from Then Victory. 10 out of 10, would listen again. Excellent podcast. Oh, I'm sorry, that's a 5-star review. 10 out of 10, would listen again. Excellent podcast. I thoroughly enjoyed listening weekly to the rotating panel, discuss interesting Canadian issues, also to hear which beers they are drinking. So you heard it here first, folks. We're going to keep drinking.
I'll try and mix it up.
Or
every week.
occasionally some wines, just
Or
to switch it up.
some wine. Yeah. Well,
We're
you're
classy
fancy.
like that sometimes.
That's right. I'm sorry, does your wine glass not have a stem? Is that one of those ones you can't knock over?
Yeah,
Amazing.
I would knock it over. And then otherwise it would be like sitting like this in the frame, like just kind of like a douchebag, like.
Well, I appreciate
And then
you
I'd have to
keeping the
light some
douchebag out of
candles
frame.
or something too, you know, and just romance myself a little or something, because that's what you do when you have wine and candles, right?
Well, hey, Saturday afternoons, you got to learn sex ed somehow.
That's true. Maybe I'll just have to put the computer in front of the tub for one episode. Let's do it all from there.
Fantastic. Facebook feedback for the people our listenership has actually gone up. We must be getting funnier as we get later.
That
Facebook
older
feedback.
audience.
Oh, maybe that's what maybe they're drinking too.
Yeah.
We've got a Facebook message from Michael Sparks. And this is serious time, guys. Michael has some important and critical feedback for us. So just listening to your first podcast now. First impressions, you called me an idiot. Not a great start. You're 100% against anything conservative, seemingly blindly. Wanted to turn it off before the 5-minute mark, but I'm going to listen to all of your episodes for the benefit of the doubt and see if your all or nothing attitude changes.
So does he mean anti-conservative politically, or in the broader sense of I'm against things that are conservative in nature?
I'm not sure. Michael and I exchanged some more Facebook messages. He has listened to some more episodes, and we do want to thank him. And if he is listening tonight, we want to thank him for sticking with us and hope that he's enjoying our podcast as it matures and finds itself, because we are a very new podcast, and I don't know what I'm doing. But
well, yeah, and I mean, all
What
of
did
you
we talk about in
out.
episode 1?
in episode 1, you, Tyler, Sean, Jeff, and I were on, and we were very, very disappointed about the outcome of the federal election in Canada. And I believe we didn't call anyone an idiot. We specifically didn't call Michael an idiot. But I did hear in the first 5 minutes, Jeff made a comment asking who the dummies were that elected this guy. Something to that effect.
Okay.
We may have had a panelist that implied that people that elected the Liberal Party were dummies.
Yeah, Jeff's not here, so let's just
We
blame it on
may
him.
have all gone with that because that's how we feel. I'm not sure about how we're against anything conservative. I think that we're all...
I am going to say if the shoe fits, but you can blame that entirely on me. I will take all the credit for that. And it's not just for anyone that voted Liberal or NDP or Conservative or whatever they voted for. If the shoe fits for whatever it is, it fits.
It fits, exactly. And I think I wouldn't say that we're especially conservative. I mean, we are definitely more of a right-of-center group of individuals that tends to be on this panel. I would say that we all fall pretty well actually in the true center of the political spectrum, in that almost everyone that's been on the panel has been a libertarian. Yeah. We've had a few people that
I don't like to classify myself as any particular party, because I like to hear what everybody has to say before I make a decision. But, I mean, generally, I would say I've got, views that range, at least if you're looking at our Canadian political spectrum, all the way from, like, the Alliance on the uber right to, NDP. Like, I believe that we do need certain social programs, and I do believe that we also need smaller government. Like, they need to step in where it's important, and then fuck off where they don't belong.
I think that's more the general consensus of everyone that's been on the panel, is we're not so much against the left side of the government, we're just more against big government. It doesn't matter who's at the helm. We don't like people interfering with us. Everyone on this panel, in my perspective, just wants to be left alone. We want to do our own thing until we're hurting someone else.
Yeah, like, I believe we need them to step in to organize things and do certain things for us as a people, because otherwise shit's just not going to get done. Like, garbage pickup and things like that, would not get done if there wasn't somebody in charge.
I don't know. Free market says it would happen. Up until 1918, how did roads get built in the United States? They still got built. How did the railroads get built? They still got built. Private enterprise took care of that. The government did.
You know what I mean? Like, there's shit that, it makes it easier. Right?
And I'm not disputing that. There are certain functions of government within the spectrum of being a realist and understanding that we're within the age that we live in, and it's 2015.
Topic for a whole nother show, guys. Talk about this for 3 hours.
Yeah, that's thanks, Tyler. That's a good point. The point is,
the voice of reason, as always.
Yeah, we'd like to thank Michael for continuing to listen. We hope he's listening tonight, or at least I hope he's listening tonight. I don't speak for everybody else, although sometimes I like to think I can. Hopefully you see that we have a balanced approach, although we were definitely a group of people that were rather dejected with the outcome of the federal election because of the way it impacted everyone on that panel in a personal way.
And by all means, he's allowed to think that I'm an idiot, too. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I've never made any qualms about that. I know exactly where I fall on that spectrum.
Yeah, I'm definitely an idiot. I'm fine with that.
We also have feedback from Roger Dave, RGR Dave. I assume that's Roger Dave. Great podcast, and specifically on episode 8, he really enjoyed that interview. That's it for feedback. It's time for the widget of the week. So you'll have to excuse me. I have to step back to my bench. This is his VZ58 for those of you that are on camera. This is an unloaded VZ58. Everyone can see that that's unloaded. It does not have a magazine. I'm probably too far away from the microphone for that to have come through clearly, so we have an unloaded rifle.
No, we heard you. Loud and clear.
Excellent. Specifically, I want to talk about this little device on the bottom that's used for releasing the magazine. This is from Delask. They're a Canadian company in BC. I just put a review up on Everyday Tactical of the magazine release. It's $20 some odd with shipping, $25 plus shipping and tax. CNC machined out of 7075 T6 aluminum and then hard anodized black. It replaces the stock magazine release. It's like 3 times length. It's like nearly 3 inches long. So
Well, I have mine. I can show everyone the stock one.
Excellent.
So that's the stock one right there.
So it's wee and tiny and doesn't quite get past the trigger guard, and the extended one goes well past the trigger guard.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna hit the microphone some more with my firearm because
I'll grab mine.
Everybody's getting their VZ58.
It's the Canadian AK, bro.
It is the Canadian AK. It's as close as an AK as we're gonna get in this country. For $25, I think it's a fantastic piece of kit. Shipping on its own is kind of a bummer because Canada Post from BC to Ontario for me is not a good time, even though it's a little tiny package.
I will tell you this though: the other big VZ company like Zahal in Israel, if you were to get that same part from them, would cost you way more.
Yes,
Easy.
and that's the reason that I got this from Delask was because I was ordering some other stuff from Delask anyway, and with
they've got nice stuff. They do.
They do. I use some of their other products, and I was getting something anyway, and I'm like, well, $25 more. I'm already paying a bunch of shipping. Sure, why not, right? I'll try it.
Yeah.
We'll see if it works. Ergonomics are a huge improvement with the new magazine release. The old one, my fat, big white guy thumb here, kept getting stuck in the magazine release. The new one, because I can get to it under the magazine release, or use my trigger finger to get to it, or use a magazine to release it, like AK style. Immense improvement in manipulation and handling.
I think we need to have a VZ party at some point.
So everybody's got a VZ.
You guys didn't include me. I'm so embarrassed.
But you guys just don't keep it just sitting there? Like home
Well-
invaders?
Well, that's what that's for.
Yeah. So everybody's got a VZ. Everybody's been drinking. Everybody's got no magazines and no ammunition. Everybody's proved their firearms safe.
Oh, totally safe.
Yeah.
I
perfect.
use the BC Tactical magazine release, which
Oh,
has
no.
similar properties, but
That's
it juts
interesting.
out. I don't know if I can really show you. On
Yeah, no, it's kind of
camera.
it's fat, right? Like it comes out wider from the receiver. It's not a light
Yeah,
thing that it goes down.
It kicks out the left side of the receiver, which gives you better access. Yeah.
That's interesting.
So I looked at that from BC Tactical because they sell it in combo with the bolt release.
Yep.
I ended up getting the bolt release from Zahal, and man, that is it's the stupidest thing because it's like $230 for like a part that's this fucking size.
Mhm.
But I mean, if you engage it, it's just that's it. It's
Yeah.
beauty. It's probably the best money that I've ever spent on this rifle because it makes it so much easier.
So for 25% the cost of a rifle, you can have a button that makes it close better.
Yeah, but then I'm not doing this fucking overhand nonsense, right?
It's all
Yes.
about the overhand nonsense.
I mean, you can still do that if you want, but
Yeah. I don't know. I want to look at a magazine release. Delask didn't have any. I was working on something else. The girlfriend's got a GSG that needed new sights. I like the GSG sights at Delask. So I figured, you know what? I'm already paying shipping. It's not going to cost me anything.
exactly for the $20 and the 30
Yeah.
seconds it takes to install. It's so easy. Pop that dust cover off, that one pin out, and then you don't even need to take the side pin all the way, just halfway.
So I pulled the
Rock
side
right.
pin all the way, not really knowing. I've never taken apart a VZ. I don't know VZ. I'm an AR guy. I build ARs. ARs are a thing I intimately understand. Russian or communist gun? No idea, comrade. I don't know.
This thing is so easy though. But
I took this whole thing apart. I took like 8 pins out of this thing, and I think the whole process still only took me about 40 minutes.
exactly. It's so simple. The whole thing just kind of comes apart and then goes back together. But yeah, to change that, there's one pin. You take your dust cover off. Your
Yeah, the only pin that was really a
Springs out.
problem is I don't know how well this is going to show up on camera. If I can get the light and everything to work out, there's this little pin. It doesn't really show up in where the trigger guard is. That
and it's
center
more of a
pin.
pain in the ass to get to than anything.
Well, it's a split pin, and there isn't like you can't just drive it out with a punch. So you have to have like a pick to get the split pin to go together, and then get it out with a punch.
I used a punch, and mine came right out.
Nah, mine's got some kind of weird little retaining hook on the one side, so you couldn't get the retaining hook back into the channel.
Probably got sheared off or something funny when they machined it, or
yeah. So it was.
Mine came right out. Like
once I figured out how to get that pin out, yeah, it wasn't really hard. It just took me a minute to figure out because my one real complaint from Delask is like everything from Delask, there's no instructions.
Yeah, I didn't have any from Zahal either. I had to fucking YouTube that shit.
Well, good news. If you want to go on everydaytactical.com, there are detailed pictures, descriptions, and tool requirements for what I've discovered is the more efficient way of installing. Now that I've invested the time doing it a couple of times to figure out what the best way to put one in is.
But I guess that's what makes us as firearms owners awesome. We are problem solvers.
Yeah.
For sure.
Like, I didn't care for the original handguard retaining pin on mine, so I found a roll pin that was the appropriate size to replace it. It's
yeah,
much,
that was the only
solid
pin that I had a problem with. Like, I put the handguard on, and the pin that's right here was the one that was a pain in the ass for me.
Yep.
I was just hammering away on that thing, and it would not come out. Everything else, no problem.
Yep. That's the bottom pin on your receiver there?
Yeah, the lower handguard retaining pin.
What is it? It's not a roll pin. What is it? Is it just press fit?
I think it's a taper pin.
Yeah.
Neat. Okay, I'll have to try and take that apart at some point and see how mine's put together. Because I've discovered
it might be peened into place, maybe.
Oh.
Probably, because mine was a bitch.
Yeah.
If you are going to take it off, though, like I said, I do have a spare one of these that has the rail attachments, but they double ship me. So if either of you guys want it, it's yours, free.
Cool.
Or if anyone else on watching has a VZ and wants it, if they can get a hold of me, it's theirs. Because they double ship me one, and it's not worth it for me to spend money to send it back to them.
Yeah.
I told them, and they're like, just keep it.
Just keep it. Well, I mean, that's the nature of dealing with Canada Post, right? Like, it's not worth shipping stuff in this country.
Yeah. Or especially back to Israel.
Yeah, or back to Israel.
The Northeastern Arms handguards, because I found that the OEM Beaver Barf retained way too much heat. As soon as you put like 150 rounds through the thing, the handguard just got way too hot to hold on to.
Yeah,
so I found that the aluminum was way better.
Yeah, this is just a polymer Fab Defense one, but I find it like it's got enough vents in it, it doesn't heat up, and it's spaced out enough that my hand doesn't get hot. And I mean, I can put a couple hundred rounds easy down it in no time, and I'm still not burning my hand. So.
Well, we should get some more parts to review for the VZ. The next thing I got is I've got Sean's, I think, Gladius muzzle brake, which I have to do a review on, or finish the review on. I started the review on it. And then because, Larry Vickers said so, I had to have a sling. All my guns have the same sling. It's all blue.
The Vickers sling?
Yeah, everything in my safe has a Vickers. It doesn't matter what it is, they all get Vickers slings.
Even your Glock 34?
Especially my Glock 34.
Those pistol lanyards always I find funny.
Yeah, all of my long arms get a sling, and they all get a Vickers sling, and I won't mess around with anything else anymore.
I like the Magpul sling, especially on this. Like, because I put the rail dust cover on it, and then just put a Magpul sling loop on it, and man, that thing just holds it's so well.
I ended up going with one of these. It's an AK, or I guess it's not an AK adapter. It's a universal sling adapter thing.
Yeah. I know the one you're talking about. Yeah.
Same kind of deal.
Although I did put the Magpul AK grip on this thing.
Do you like the AK grip?
Oh, I love it. It's almost identical, but it's got that sort of soft rubbery texture.
Mm.
And then because it's the Magpul one, I keep a little oil in there, in the little removable compartment.
I use the Fab Defense grip.
That's what I've got as the Fab.
I don't like that's what I didn't like about the original is those finger grooves and everything. To me, this is more like an AR grip, which I like.
You know what? I don't mind the Fab Defense. It really reminds me of the old A2 AR grips, the one that had the finger groove.
But
Yeah, I
it's
don't like that.
fat enough. The A2 grip is too thin. The dimensionally it just doesn't feel right.
Yeah, I mean
Alright.
you can modify it. I think there's Beaver Tactical or something that's making a grip adapter that you can put AR grips. So it'll have the same top pattern as the I guess receiver plate on the VZ, and you put that in, and then you put an AR grip in, and then just bolt the whole thing through.
Yeah.
Does it not already use an AK grip from the factory? Is this not
Nope.
interchangeable with an AK grip?
No,
Oh, it's not.
You need some
if you look at the
modification.
bottom of yours, there's a plate, like a little plate that goes around it. I had to pull that off.
Oh, that's not part of the... Oh, okay.
So that just mounts flush to the thing. It's like the same size, but there's like that little steel lip.
Yeah.
I just ripped that off.
Yeah, I think
that's all you have
back
to
in
do.
the day, the
The
Soviet
bolt was
government
safe.
only mandated that it use the same ammunition as the AK.
Yeah, because the Czechs are so good at building guns, they got
Yeah.
licensed to kind of do their own thing.
Well, even the Soviets were smart enough to not destroy the Czech arms industry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if anybody has anything else that they think I should add, since apparently I need to review a handguard, a sling, a muzzle brake, a different handguard.
Dude, we should just go to the range one day and film an episode about VZs from the range.
That's
I'm
a great
down.
idea. That's
I'm
a good
down.
idea.
Yeah. I mean, we've all got them, and everyone's kind of tweaked them out a little differently, right?
Yep.
Well, and that's the thing. I don't have communist guns, and I've not had a 7.62 gun before. And I'm like, you know what? 22 is not available. 7.62 is dirt frickin' cheap.
Yeah.
Get
Dude,
a communist
you
gun. I will
Especially
see
if you
how
buy
it goes.
corrosive.
Well, and that's, I mean, that. Why would you not? It's 18 cents a
Yeah.
round. Like your
Clean your
basic.
gun. That's it.
Yeah. Clean your
Yeah.
gun.
Which you do anyways, or you should.
Yeah.
Would you? For everyone listening, clean your gun.
Literally and figuratively.
Even then, the danger of corrosive ammo is overstated.
Well, especially on these
Especially in
VZs
Ontario.
with a VZ in the chrome barrel too.
Yeah. But like I had my first gun ever was a Chinese SKS, and I was totally ignorant of the corrosive properties of the ammunition. I shot the thing. I put 900 rounds through the thing. Didn't clean it for 7 months. Not a speck of rust.
Yeah.
You know.
And
Yeah,
even if
well,
it is,
It depends on how it's stored. It's dependent on your
Yeah.
ammo. Depends on
It
where
was
you...
stored in a climate-controlled environment in Ontario. You know, if you live in BC, okay, you get like 180% humidity all the time, then maybe it's a problem. But
yeah. Well, if you want to get your commie gun on too, I'll bring out my M44. That thing
Okay,
is awesome.
we'll have to do like a commie range day video thing
Oh,
for
yeah.
YouTube or something.
okay, I gotta buy my Tokarev back off my buddy then.
Just borrow it. It's fine.
Yeah.
Rent it. Free market.
Just get him to bring it to the range, and then we'll just shoot it.
Ah, he lives in Calgary.
Get him to ship it to the range. We'll send it back.
Yeah. They have forms for that, right?
I guess so.
Yeah. All right. So, Delask or BC Tactical or Beaver Tactical, bunch of options. This one was Delask. I like it. Full review, everydaytactical.com, with the installation instructions for those of you that are like me and are mechanically inept and not sure what to do, so that you don't have to waste 40 minutes taking all the pins out to figure out which one's the important one. Shall we hit the outro? Does anybody else have anything else before we wrap it up for today?
No, I'm good.
All right. So I promised everybody a second quote from Lemmy. Second and final quote today, also from the autobiography White Line Fever. I don't understand people who believe that if you ignore something, it'll go away. It's completely wrong. If it's ignored, it gathers strength. Europe ignored Hitler for 20 years, and as a result, he slaughtered a quarter of the world. Which, again, I think is a very apt quote for our podcast.
Yep.
It's directly applicable to all of the new laws that the government's bringing into force in January of this year.
Yeah.
There's hardly anything increasing our freedoms. This is all further restricting your personal freedom as a Canadian. There's barely anything that's making it easier for you to live or making your life better. It's more regulation, and it's the Department of making me sad.
Yep.
All right. If people want to stay in touch with Tyler, the best place for you is still the International Liberty or Death podcast.
Yep. Yeah, I do a podcast usually every other week. International Liberty Death Podcast. We're on Facebook. Just look that up. Twitter and Instagram at Liberty Podcast. And you can find me personally on Facebook, Tyler Gerard. If you're friends with Andrew or Gavin, then we're friends in common, so you find me, no problem.
All right. And Gavin, the best place if people want to follow you is that still Instagram?
Yeah, I mean, if you can find me on Facebook too, that works. I mean, you'll probably see me through doing this. Yeah, but yeah.
Right on.
Friends with these guys. We're all friends.
And your Instagram account is urbexgta, right?
Correct. Yeah.
All right. And we'll have a link to those in the show notes. I am, of course, Andrew. You can see all of my work on everydaytactical.com, where I discuss guns, gear, and beer, and anything else I find tactical or interesting. We're also on Instagram and Twitter at edtactical. For the podcast, you can visit our website, CanadianPatriotPodcast.com, or visit us on Facebook, Facebook.com/CanadianPatriotPodcast. If you'd like to leave us feedback, I'd like to read it on the show. We might even rebuttal some of it. I'm not sure what the correct response to rebutting something is. No comments. Okay. CanadianPatriotPodcast.com/feedback or email feedback@CanadianPatriotPodcast.com. Let us know what you think. And this is the part in the show where we would like to remind all of our listeners that you are the true North, strong and free.